Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to Let's Start Story on What If Naruto Had Abilities to End War of Battle in Naru X Ino Part 1. So do 4 blue hearts comment. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video, and please share with your friends and watch till end. Also check out Patreon for I have upload Harry x Hermione uncensored spicy version, link in description. White. That was the first thought to flow through his mind upon opening his eyes. The idea wasn't completely unfounded. White wall, white ceiling, even the fluorescent bulbs were a blinding white. Despite his current state, it didn't take the boy long to wrap his mind around where he was, the Konoha hospital. When you're the single most hated existence within 100 miles, not to mention a defenseless child, the hospital becomes practically a second home. What his foggy mind, Naruto could not figure out was how he got there, nor why. In a rush, it came flooding back to him. Rasengan. Chidori. Even channeling that much of Kyuubi's chakra, Naruto maintained some control over both his actions and emotions. Enough, at least, that he recognized that he could never truly kill Sasuke, the teammate and friend he loved like a brother. All throughout his fight with Sasuke, he was pulling his punches. Every time their trump attacks met, he lowered the power he fed to the Rasengan, so that the attacks merely cancelled. Their battle on the hospital rooftop proved the difference between the strength of the attacks. However, in that last charge, between Orochimaru's cursed seal, the Sharingan, and his own natural agility, Sasuke managed to prevent the attacks from colliding, apparently counting on his superior reach protecting him from Naruto's Rasengan. In fact, it was only Naruto's last-ditch movement that saved Sasuke from having his insides turned into liquid. The end result was merely a scratch on his forehead protector. Unfortunately for Naruto, Sasuke had no such qualms about completing his attack, driving his arm completely through the boy's chest. Before he could attempt to piece together what occurred between then and his arrival at his present location, a shout of, "He's awake! Get Shizune and inform the Hokage!" interrupted his thoughts. Turning his head ever so slightly, he managed to see something that was certainly different from his previous trips to the hospital. There were people there, waiting for him to wake up. He managed to make out the faces of Hinata, Sakura, Gaara, and his siblings before the door to his room burst open, and the Godime Hokage, Tsunade, and her apprentice, Shizune, were standing over him checking his vitals. "Vitals look strong. Naruto, how do you feel? Are you feeling any pain?" asked the concerned Hokage. He moved his mouth, but no words actually came out, his throat dry from prolonged disuse. In seconds, Shizune had a cold glass of water to his lips, and he relished the cool water, soothing his throat and washing awa. Why the lingering copper taste of blood that persisted even after all this time? For that matter, how long had it been? Trying again, he managed to rasp out, "I feel fine, boss-san, just tired." How long was I out? A vein appeared on Tsunade's forehead at the nickname, but Shizune calmly stepped between the two before the slug Sannin could kill her patient. "You've been out for nearly a week, Naruto-kun." A week? That actually terrified Naruto. The one benefit he'd found up until this point in his life of being the container for the most powerful of the Biju was that it provided him amazing recovery ability. He could normally bounce back from anything after only a few hours. Hell, even when he was a kid and villagers and shinobi alike decided that his continued existence was an insult to their Yaj, and something they took into their own hands to correct, the worst of which was normally on the anniversary of Kyuubi's defeat at the hands of the Yondaime Hokage. He was always released from the hospital within 24 hours. Just how close to death had he been? "What happened? How'd I get here? Are the others okay?" he asked in quick succession as his eyelids drooped and he quickly felt his strength leaving him. Seeing his exhausted state, Tsunade simply replied, "They're all fine, you just rest now." Sighing in relief, Naruto closed his eyes and drifted back to sleep. Scene change. There was a reason that Naruto was out for so long. In addition to the life-threatening wounds he'd received, while not a lie, it was a gross exaggeration on the Hokage's part that everyone was fine. The others, as Naruto referred to them, was referring to the Konoha genin sent on the mission to retrieve Uchiha Sasuke and return him safely to Konoha. At face value, it sounded simple, but the mission ended up being anything but. Sasuke, it turned out, was being accompanied by the Sound 4, Orochimaru's elite guard. While individually the members weren't spectacular shinobi, each had been graced with Orochimaru's curse seal level 2. Which provided them with a massive boost in strength and chakra enough that the four of them were able to defeat two Junin without sustaining any apparent wounds. Just to add icing to the cake, when the mission dragged out longer than expected, Kabuto sent Kagaya Kimimaro, arguably Sound's strongest ninja, Orochimaru excluded despite his failing body. Miraculously, the mission ended without any casualties on Konoha's part. However, 3 of the genin remain in stable condition, but not out of danger yet. Akamichi Choji used all 3 of the Akamichi pills, which granted him the strength to defeat his opponent, but had the unfortunate side effect of causing such fast metabolism that the body literally began to break down. It was only thanks to Tsunade's status as the world's greatest medic that managed to halt the effects. Even so, Choji's body remained terribly weak and would take some time to reverse the damage. Hyuga Neji got speared clean Hero by an arrow by the 6-armed Kitamaru. Thanks to his Byakugan, he managed to dodge just enough to prevent a killing blow, but the wound was dangerously close to his heart and he had nearly bled out by the time Anbu managed to get him to safety. It took a whole team of medics and a complex healing seal to repair the damage, although the boy had yet to wake up. Inuzuka Kiba's only major damage was a deep Kwani wound in his abdomen, from which he was rapidly losing blood. Ironically, this was self-inflicted despite his opponent far outclassing him. His wound had been healed, but the boy remained bedridden as any excessive movement could cause the wound to begin to bleed internally again. By the time Hitaki Kakashi managed to carry Naruto back from the Valley of the End, the majority of the medic nins Konoha employed, along with the Hokage and Shizune themselves, were exhausted mentally and physically, and had nearly exhausted their chakra. In truth, despite the boy's unnatural healing, it was truly a miracle that he survived, the Hokage having just enough chakra to augment Kyuubi's natural healing ability to get him out of the danger zone. After that, it was entirely up to the fox to repair Naruto's battered body. Scene change. The next time Naruto awoke, he was feeling much better, rested and recovered. In fact, he felt he was back to 100%. Chancing a glance to his I'd where the group of people had been the last time he was cognizant, he was both elated and disappointed. While his disappointment stemmed from the fact that a group no longer resided there, he was grateful to see that one had remained. Looking closer, he was surprised to see who it was. Yamanaka Ino lay curled up in a chair, fast asleep in the far corner of the room. The girl who always took such pride in her appearance looked like a complete mess. It was clear that she hadn't showered or groomed herself in several days and she had dark circles under her eyes. Like any good ninja, when Naruto attempted to sit up, the movement alerted Ino and her blue eyes snapped open to stare into Naruto's own. After taking about 1/10 of a second to recognize what was going on, she launched herself out of the chair to get the nurse. Returning not a minute later with Shizune in tow, Ino hung back while Shizune checked Naruto over and announced him as having a clean bill of health, but absolutely forbade him from getting out of bed until at least the next morning. Giving a nod to Ino, she left to finish her duties. Once she was gone, Ino looked up and asked, "Are you really all right?" "Yeah, I feel fine." Noticing through the window that it was now dark, he asked, "What time is it anyways?" "It's a little after midnight, I believe." Ino. "Not that I don't appreciate the company, but, what are you doing here so late?" "Well, if you recall, several of us were here when you woke up earlier. All of the Rookie 9, Team Guy, and Gaara's team have actually been camping out at the hospital, waiting for you and the others to wake up. Well, once you did, Tsunade-sama hurried us all out of the room saying that you needed your rest and the commotion wouldn't be good. She did allow you to have one visitor at a time though. So here we are." Choosing his words carefully, Naruto continued, "That makes sense I guess, but why are you here? I mean, we've never been what anyone could consider close. I guess I just would have expected Sakura-chan or Kakashi-sensei or someone." "Oh, well, Sakura was in here. She was the first person that the Hokage allowed to stay, but I relieved her about 2 hours ago. As I'm sure you can guess, she's had an emotional time for the last week. She hadn't left this room and has hardly slept at all. Heck, she was admitted for a day when the lack of sleep caught up with her. The Hokage had me send her home to get some rest." Ino chewed her lip for a moment before continuing. I was the one who was here when Kakashi brought you in. I could barely even recognize you. Your hair was dyed red from the blood. She brought her knees up to her chest and wrapped her arms around them. I guess I just needed to assure myself that you really were okay. She paused. What actually happened to you? Quote. Naruto sighed and looked down. What do you know about the mission? He asked in a quiet voice. Over the next hour, Ino summarized everything she learned from Shikamaru, Kiba, Lee, the Sand siblings, Kakashi, the hospital staff, and even the random Anbu who brought in the injured. It was impossible to know all of the details of what had occurred as two of the participants were still unconscious. But based on the damage to the areas, Kakashi and the Anbu were able to glean a general idea of what had occurred. Though he was upset to hear of the condition that Neji, Kiba, and Choji found themselves, Naruto silently thanked the gods that they would pull through. His thoughts came crashing back to the conversation at hand when Ino asked, did Sasuke really go to Orochimaru by his own free will? Quote. A low growl escaped Naruto's throat. It was only Naruto's mind wrapping around the word, Sasuke, that kept Naruto from exploding at Ino. As one of the founding members of the Uchiha's fan club, Ino had never referred to the brooding Avenger without the kun suffix as long as he'd known her. Naruto was so shocked with this that it held his anger below the breaking point. It was truly amazing how betrayal can change a person's view on another. Through gritted teeth he replied, Sasuke didn't just choose to desert Konoha, he was an active participant in his escape. As your account of the mission suggested, by the time I caught up Sasuke at the Valley of the End, he was traveling alone. You saw the condition I was in when I was brought back in. Use your mind to fill in the blanks. When I confronted him directly, he attacked me with lethal force, even going as far as to shove our teacher's prized assassination technique through my chest and leave me for dead. Even without raising his voice, his pain and anger were clear. Anger deflated, Naruto turned away from her, fully intending to ignore the blonde. Unnoticed by Naruto, his words cut through Ino like physical blows. As pitiful as she looked before, she shrank even further into herself with Naruto's pronouncement. A prolonged, uncomfortable silence ensued, only broken when Ino suddenly broke down and began to cry. Not being a heartless bastard, Naruto couldn't just ignore her in such a state. Turning back, he asked, Hey, are you alright? Shaking her head slightly, she murmured something. So quietly that even straining to hear Naruto was unable to pick up. I didn't catch that, what? He asked gently. Not having practiced consoling girls, Naruto was completely at a loss as to what to do. What am I supposed to do now? Sasuke was the whole reason that I became a shinobi. I thought it would give me a chance to get closer to him and get him to like me. But, just look at me. I'm nothing, even in comparison to the other rookie genin. I was not prepared for the Chunin exam, but reasoned with myself that if I was ever in trouble, he would come save me. Hell, I welcomed that notion. Had I been sent on the retrieval mission, I would have been killed in seconds. Listen Ino, Naruto spoke softly, doing anything with your life for someone else and not for yourself is just asking to be miserable. Entering a profession as dangerous as being a shinobi is just suicidal if you're not serious about it. You really need to take a hard look at your life and decide if this is something you really want to do. If it is, get back out there and take it seriously. Apply yourself in your training, expand your skills, learn your strengths and embrace them, learn your weaknesses and minimize them. If this life isn't what you want, get out now before you pointlessly get yourself killed. Pondering what he had said, Ino nodded, surprised to hear something so profound from the normally hyperactive, goofy blonde. She had a lot of soul-searching in front of her, but Naruto's speech actually did make her feel better. Hey Gaki. The voice surprised the two, neither had sensed anyone approaching. Fortunately, he was not an enemy. As Ino was in no shape to move at the moment. Turning towards the window and the source, they found a man leaning against the frame with his eyes closed and arms crossed. Eros Sanin. Naruto called out with the first hint of his former enthusiasm. Ignoring the hated nickname, he opened his eyes and smiled. Good to see you're doing alright. His face grew serious. I just spoke with the Hokage. Our spies tell us that neither Akatsuki nor Orochimaru will be able to continue their plans for at least 3 years. I'm taking it upon myself to ensure that you Ready when their threat presents itself again. Get up and get your things, we have to leave immediately for an extended training mission. The Hokage has agreed, you are now officially my apprentice. Nodding, Naruto pulled himself out of bed and headed to the bathroom to change out of his hospital gown. Turning to Ino, Jiraiya said, you really should heed that advice, I couldn't have said it better myself. The life of a ninja is tough, you'll have to deal with death of all kinds, your enemies and your friends. If you're not prepared for it, you're just going to die young. Acknowledging his words, Ino nodded but remained silent. When Naruto emerged from the bathroom in his trademark orange jumpsuit, Jiraiya glanced at him and said, get anything you may need and meet me at the front gate as soon as possible. Seeing Naruto's nod, he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Stepping through the open window, Naruto addressed Ino one last time. Tell everyone goodbye for me. When I come back I'll be a lot stronger. And, good luck, with whatever you decide to do. With that, he pushed off and was gone. Two figures stood on top of the Hokage monument looking over the village of Konoha. Ah, it's good to be home. It had been 3 years, 3 long, wonderful years since he'd last seen his home. Sure, when he last left he was hated by the vast majority of its inhabitants, but Konoha held something that would always bring him back, the people precious to him. Long golden hair obscured his angular face as he looked down upon the village. No longer the boy he was when he left, Naruto had shot up in height thanks to Jiraiya forcing him to break his nothing but ramen diet, had lost his baby fat, and displayed toned muscles under his new attire. Early into the trip, Jiraiya had forced him to lose the Kill Me orange jumpsuit that Naruto had worn as long as he remembered. Dressed for practicality, Naruto now wore simple black shinobi pants not too loose as to inhibit movement, a GHT black shirt under a mostly black flak jacket with the kanji for Crimson Fox in red on the back. In order to honor the one vendor to sell him clothes when he was a child, the vest contained stripes of orange on the shoulders. To complete the ensemble were a pair of shinobi sandals and fingerless gloves with metal plates on the back. Smiling at his protege, Jiraiya told him, I know you want to go and find your friends and head to Ichiraku, but you had best go see Tsunade first. I've put a lot of work into you, it'd be a shame if she killed you now for not seeing her immediately. With a laugh, Naruto merely waved him off. Of course Aro Sanin. Besides, Tsunade Basen is on the top of my list. Let's do this. With that, Naruto proceeded to jump off the monument and free fall to the ground. After 3 years with Naruto, this didn't give the old toad hermit a heart attack, instead he just chuckled and disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Moments from the ground, the wind began to swirl around Naruto, slowing his descent until he landed lightly on the ground. Surprised by the sudden appearance, the gate guards were instantly on guard staring at the newcomer with weapons raised. Don't bother. He'll crush you, came a voice from behind them. Spinning to face the new threat, brought Kamizuki Izumo and Hagane Katetsu face to face with none other than Jiraiya of the Sannin. Being that each of them had been promoted to Junin in Jiraiya's absence, to be snuck up on like this meant the person really was a shinobi of Jiraiya's caliber. Jiraiya-sama, exclaimed Katetsu. It's been a long time. What brings you back to Konoha? Quote, mission complete. Then, that's, Izumo trailed off. Uzumaki Naruto, says the blonde, lifting his head and revealing his startlingly blue eyes, large grin, and the trio of whisker marks on each cheek. Shocked into silence at the changes that had come to the blonde since they last saw him in the Chunin exams, the two guards could only stare back and forth between Naruto and the visage carved into the mountain behind him. Having grown up and grown out his hair, Naruto now looked far too much like the Yondaime Hokage to be ignored. We're off to meet with Tsunade, care to let us through? Jiraiya asked when the silence stretched on longer than he could stand. Of course sir. Responded Izumo, immediately signaling for the gates to open and allow them entrance. The moment they were opened wide enough, Jiraiya added, don't bother informing the fifth that we're here, we're on our way to surprise her now. And with that, the two vanished in a swirl of leaves. Scene change. The slug Sannin quirked an eyebrow, trying to glean any information on the state of her opponent. Sure, she was well known throughout the continents as the legendary sucker. But even she had never been beaten so consistently by a single opponent. Her opponent simply sat there, unmoving, not divulging any secrets in how she could best them. With a resigned sigh, Tsunade gave into the undeniable fact that she would never best her most hated opponent. Even so, as Hokage of the Leaf, she had no choice but to endure. Lifting a pen, she continued with her paperwork. "Hey boss-san," came a voice right in her ear. The suddenness of the unexpected greeting caused the busty woman to jump so high that the paperwork went flying everywhere. Turning to face the intruder, she found herself face to face with her surrogate little brother. Unable to control the grin that sprung up on her face, she enveloped him in a hug. That was of course, before his greeting caught up with her and she promptly threw him through the door. "What have I told you about calling me that?" she yelled to his sprawled out body, that was until it puffed away into smoke. "You were right, Ero Sanin. It's much funnier when you're watching than when you're the one it's happening to." Turning around, Tsunade found Naruto lounging in her chair with his feet up on the desk and the perverted hermit standing next to him. Still laughing at the scene that had just unfolded before them. Not a moment later, both had giant bruises on their heads courtesy of the fists that Tsunade had swatted each of them with moments before. "Geez boss-san, lighten up, is that how you greet us after 3 years?" Deciding to ignore the hated nickname just this once, Tsunade once again embraced Naruto, pinching him. This time to ensure it wasn't a cage bushin. Stepping back to really look at him, she couldn't help but smile at the man he had become. "You look just like your father. You're going to be beating the girls off with a stick." Jiraiya had told Naruto of his heritage during the last year of their training trip. He had actually not known for sure until Tsunade had found a confidential file of the lat. Hokage Sarutobi over a year after she took the job. Initially Naruto was beyond mad having found out that such an important aspect of his life was kept from him, but was eventually calmed by Jiraiya's explanation of how his father had ordered it kept from him until he was able to protect himself, for he had acquired many enemies during his relatively short life. It was this revelation that sparked Naruto into intentionally growing out his hair as a tribute to his deceased family. Blushing, Naruto put his hand behind his head. "Thanks boss-san, that means a lot." With a light smile, Tsunade missed him with, "Thank you for coming to see me, it's great to see you again, but I can get Jiraiya here to give his report on your training. You go on ahead and find your friends and get something to eat. Your apartment is still yours. Go get settled back in and come see me tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. sharp." With a smile Naruto gave her another hug before jumping out the window and free falling to the earth below. Now, Tsunade, who had not spent the last 3 years with Naruto, panicked at seeing him plummet out of sight. Rushing to the window, she had just enough time to see him land lightly in his feet and begin strolling away in search of his friends. Turning around to find a once again hysterical Jiraiya, all humor disappeared from her face. "It seems to me like you have a lot to report." Scene change. Naruto made it all of about 6 steps before he ran into one person he was both excited and dreading to see. Haruno Sakura, former member of Team 7 and current apprentice of the Godime Hokage, was just outside of the Hokage Tower on her way to meet her mentor when a blonde man landed seemingly from nowhere directly in front of her. Ironically, this wasn't his intention at all, it was purely coincidental. Though he was actually looking to her left, she couldn't mistake those whisker marks for anyone else. Naruto. Turning to face the voice who called his name, he was shocked to find none other than his pink-haired former teammate. Sakura-chan. Doing a quick run over with her eyes, Sakura couldn't help but notice the changes in Naruto. "You look great, Naruto. When do you get back?" "Just a little while ago, just finished meeting with Tsunade-bossen." Show Tsunade-sama the proper respect. She is both the Hokage and one of the Sannin. Defended Sakura, her temper beginning to rise to the surface. "What about me, how do I look? Do I look more like a woman now?" "You look fine. You haven't changed at all." Once again, the wrong thing to say as a vein could now be seen on Sakura's forehead. "Hey, bro is so brave, Sakura-san's terrifying when you piss her off," thought Konohamaru. "Naruto Nisan," he called out, causing the pair to turn. Before either could recognize him, Konohamaru added, "Warok no Jutsu," and in a puff of smoke stood a busty brunette bent in a sexy pose wearing absolutely nothing, other than tiny wisps of smoke covering her more sensitive areas. Blood rained the nearby area as passing men fell prey to Naruto's original jutsu. With another puff of smoke, Konohamaru was revealed 3 years older than Naruto had last seen him, but otherwise still relatively the same. Same basic attire, and same goggles adorning his forehead. How was that? A real drool of a jutsu, wasn't it? He exclaimed excitedly. He, Naruto began with a smile. Then, his face became serious. Konohamaru, I'm sorry, but I'm not a kid anymore. We're both ninjas now, you shouldn't use that jutsu anymore. So, Naruto hasn't just matured in appearance, this makes me feel a little sad. You truly have become something, Naruto. I'm sure you've come back with a lot of great jutsu too, right? Thought Sakura, shocked by Naruto's apparent maturity. Suddenly, a burning passion appeared in Naruto's face. Such a jutsu is now mediocre, Konohamaru. Behold, the new perverted ninjutsu I've been developing. Here we go. He shouted for all to hear. Ah, a new ninjutsu you say? A new perv. At this point Sakura's brain caught up to her words. Perverted ninjutsu. You idiot, she yelled as she decked him across the face. Now remember, Sakura has been training under Tsunade for the better part of 3 years, meaning she has learned the slug Sanin's freakish strength. Unlike all the love taps Naruto received from Sakura when they were still Team 7, this time Naruto made a small crater in the ground from the force of the blow. Not feeling any remorse, or even giving the blonde a chance to recover, Sakura picked him up by his jacket and continued. I was wrong. You haven't changed one bit. I haven't seen you in 3 years and within 2 minutes you just straight into that. Idiot, she screamed at him. What about that wonderful feeling of respect I had for you just now? As if I could feel sad that I wasn't grown up like you. Hey, Sakura-chan, calm down, Konohamaru here's terrified. Interjected a new voice. Kakashi-sensei. Sakura called out the pleasantly surprised greeting. All of the playfulness as well as bruises disappeared from Naruto's face as he greeted his former teacher in a terse tone. You've grown a lot, haven't you, Naruto? Kakashi continued, shocked by the cold greeting. Your powers of observation have clearly improved while I was gone. Naruto, why are you being like this? Asked a shocked Sakura. It's a long story, Sakura-chan. I don't really feel like going into it right now. What do you want, Kakashi-sensei? I heard you were back and, for old time's sake, I'm a bit curious to how you've developed, said Kakashi pulling out 2 bells. Meet me at Training Ground 3, the rules are the same as the first time I met you. With that, the 3 disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Training Ground 3, it's been a long time since I've been here. Said Naruto in a nostalgic voice. Not since Team 7, Sakura thought aloud. That time, Sasuke was around too, wasn't he? Added Kakashi. He was shocked to see the drastically different reactions from his 2 students. Sakura looked crestfallen at the mention of her old crush and teammate while Naruto began leaking killer intent in Kakashi's direction. Well then, shall we begin? You have until dawn tomorrow to get the bells. As before, come at me with the intent to kill if you want to have a chance at getting the bells. Scene change. I suppose I should start at the beginning. I think I need a drink. Getting a flask of sake from her secret stash in the office, she poured 2 drinks. Okay, I don't need the whole story, I've gathered most of what I know. Your honest impression of Naruto's skills. To be honest with you, Naruto surpassed my every expectation right from the get-go. Flashback. So, just where are we going, Sanin? We'll be traveling to various places. That's great. I've hardly ever been outside of Konoha. Well then, what am I going to be learning? Lots of cool new jutsu. Listen up, Gaki, now that you're officially my apprentice. I'm going to be doing everything I can to turn you into a powerful shinobi. However, what makes a good shinobi is not the number of jutsus you know. No, a good ninja is a master of the jutsu. That he does know and is able to use them to their maximal effectiveness, but most of all, they know their weaknesses and limits. What that means for your training is that I will not teach you anything new until you have mastered what you have already learned in both understanding and application. But Sanin, Naruto whined. No buts, Naruto, if you want to be able to survive what's to come, let alone reach your goal of Hokage. You need to listen to me. Now, take some time and think about what you know. I don't want to hear anything from you for an hour, but then I want you to tell me your strengths, weaknesses, and current jutsu library. Be sure to mention if you think you've mastered any of them. For one of the few times ever, Naruto actually took what the old pervert said to hear. Tien began to think on his fighting style and abilities. Jiraiya was both surprised and glad to see his student actually taking his assignment seriously. Even once the hour passed, he didn't interrupt Naruto's thoughts and merely kept walking. Finally, Naruto looked up and asked, "Are you ready for my answer?" Nodding, Jiraiya was actually surprised that he was actually eager to hear his answer. "Well, as much as it pains me to say it, I think the only things I excel at this point in time are my chakra capacity, general determination, and the resilience and power granted by the fox." Jiraiya was actually shocked by this answer. Despite the boy's concentration on the project, Jiraiya truly expected the boy to greatly overstate his strengths. The assessment Naruto provided was both surprisingly accurate. It was much the same as Jiraiya was planning to tell the boy himself, and profoundly mature. "Thinking back on my previous fights and fights I've seen," Naruto continued, "most of my skills are subpar. Even in comparison to my peers. My taijutsu is spotty at best, as I have no real form, and even if it were, even with an infinite number of clones, I wouldn't stand a chance against Lee's insane speed. I have virtually no talent for genjutsu, my chakra control is at best average, having learned the water walking, and the only ninjutsu I've mastered, or for that matter learned, are kawarimi, henge, kage bushin, kyuchusi, and rasengan." Jiraiya stopped walking and grinned. Oh yes, this was a boy he could come to like. There were very few people able to look that critically at themselves. Of course, he did seem to be under the impression that he'd mastered his ninjutsu. Oh yes, this was certainly a notion he had to address. End flashback. Sure, it took 4 months and painstakingly slow progress in basic jutsu that an academy student ought to know, but I did manage to get my point across about the benefits of mastering jutsu once he finally learned the trick about Kage Bushin being able to speed up his training. As it turns out, thanks to the Kyuubi, Naruto can handle a virtual infinite amount of mental strain from the clone's dispelling. "How the hell did you learn that?" interjected Tsunade in alarm. "Yeah, about that, moving on," evaded Jiraiya, pouring another drink. Scene change. Without any additional warning, Naruto flashed through hand seals at a blinding pace. "Kaden, Gukakyu no Jutsu," he called. Not to be outdone, Kakashi immediately recognized the jutsu and proved why he was a Junin by finished his own jutsu less than a half a second behind. "Kaden, Gukakyu no Jutsu." As the two jutsu obscured the vision of both shinobi and battled for dominance, Naruto smirked and thought, "Futon, oxygenate no jutsu," separating the component of the air and pumping pure oxygen into his jutsu. His side of the fireball increased in side threefold and immediately overtook Kakashi's, incinerating the field where he was standing. Without waiting to see the result or turning to look for Kakashi's whereabouts, Naruto immediately brought his hands together and softly said, "Ninpu, Kurigakur no Jutsu." A dense fog immediately encompassed most of the field, leaving Sakura attempting to see through the wall of fog in front of her. Before she could even move, lightning crackled through the fog, amplified by water particles. An anguished scream could be heard from within before a gust of wind blew the fog away. In the middle of the field stood Naruto, who hadn't even moved from where he began, and not 10 feet away lay a smoldering Kakashi. With a frown on his face, Naruto watched as the Kakashi cracked and disintegrated. "Chuchi Bushin," he thought to himself. Sakura looked around, left, right, behind, above. If he's not anywhere, then below. Rearing back her fist, Sakura struck the ground, and unlike most, the ground crumbled beneath her hand and exploded outwards, revealing a cowering Kakashi. What is that insane strength? The fifth didn't just CHU medical ninjutsu, I see, thought Kakashi. Hey, found you. Lesson 1, Ninjutsu, complete. Sakura boasted. Sakura-chan, do me a favor, stay out of this. I have a score to settle with Kakashi-sensei. Without waiting to even hear her response, he immediately charged Kakashi's position. Scene change. Once Jiraiya regained consciousness, he continued. Okay, I deserved that, we got lucky in that instance. After that the boy sucked up ninjutsu like a sponge. Sure, He may not have the jutsu library that Sarutobi, Kakashi, and myself have, but he knows plenty and is very crafty with those that he knows. Besides, his ninjutsu isn't the strongest aspect of his abilities, that's his taijutsu. Scene change. Kakashi had seen a lot of things in his time as a Junin, but even he was unprepared for the taijutsu Naruto brought. Midway to his position, Naruto simply disappeared. Well, at least he would have had Kakashi been a lesser Junin without his years of experience. Jumping backwards, Kakashi dodged the kick Naruto aimed at him. Following through, Naruto performed a back kick with his other leg and called out, Rankyaku. An arc of pure chakra erupted from his leg shooting out towards Kakashi's position. Ducking low, Kakashi allowed the beam sail over his head and obliterated the tree behind him. Tossing shuriken at Naruto, Kakashi was prepared to rush ahead when this time, naru to really did disappear with a quiet, soru. Before he could blink, Naruto appeared next to him and placed his hand gently on Kakashi's stomach. Impact. He whispered in Kakashi's ear. With the sound of an explosion, Kakashi sailed backwards several feet, coughed up blood, and collapsed to his knees. What was that? He asked, pulling himself back to his feet. Scene change. He created his own taijutsu style and techniques. In just 3 years, Tsunade exclaimed, shocked by this development. Yeah, that he did, took him almost 10 years of time with the clones. However, it's incredibly effective and lethal. Though only he can use it to its full effect. The Yondaime was a genius at Fuinjutsu. I mean, I taught him everything I knew, but it still took me the better part of 2 years to fully analyze the seal on Naruto. I won't get into all the specifics, but the biggest attributes to note are, beyond its obvious containment, the seal prevents Kyuubi from being able to influence Naruto directly. However, the more of the Kyuubi's chakra he draws upon, the more primal his instincts get. Most importantly, however, the seal has provided him with some of the Kyuubi's attributes such as the rapid healing, which has improved more and more over time even when he's not using Kyuubi's chakra, as well as its elemental affinities. As it turns out, the Kyuubi had affinity to both wind and lightning. Naruto's own natural affinity is wind, and the two augmented each other, giving him an unprecedented control over wind, which he manipulates into his taijutsu to devastating effect. Quote. Taking a moment to process that information, Tsunade asked the question she really wanted to know. At this point in time, how strong is Naruto? Scene change. Kakashi was in pain. The gentle hit that Naruto had dealt him was like nothing he had ever felt. It wasn't the crushing power of Gai's Guken, nor was it chakra-based attack at his internal organs like the Hyuga's Jiyuken. However, the damage it did reminded him of the Jiyuken, but with the force of one of Gai's strikes. Those were 3 of the attacks from my personal taijutsu style, Rokushiki. Responded Naruto coolly. Go ahead and uncover your trump card. I simply won't allow you to view any techniques you can copy. Kakashi chuckled. He had sorely underestimated his opponent. Granting his student's wish, he raised his headband to reveal his Sharingan eye. Very well Naruto, let's see just how far you've come, said Kakashi, casting Megan Narukumi no Jutsu when he caught Naruto's eye. In an explosion of red, Naruto SSLY threw off the jutsu and achieved the impossible. He disappeared from even Kakashi's Sharingan. Scene change. That's hard to say. Without Kyuubi's chakra, I would estimate him to be at probably Tokubetsu Junin. With it, I've never seen him go all out, but he's likely stronger than me. Hokage-sama, shouted a Chunin running into the room. There's an emergency. Hitaki Kakashi is currently in battle against an unknown opponent at Training Ground 3. Several people are converging on the location now, but I felt it best to notify you first. Jiraiya was immediately on his feet. That's not good. We have to stop this fight now. If Kakashi's fighting Naruto as I expect, you're about to be out one of your top shinobi, or at the very least, your medical services are going to be required. With that, he went to the window and jumped out onto a nearby rooftop and ran in the direction of the aforementioned training ground with Tsunade right behind him. Scene change. At this point, Kakashi was scared. Naruto was like a maelstrom of hands and feet. Even when his Sharingan was able to predict a strike, his body just couldn't keep up with the unbelievable speed his opponent was showing. Each hit that Naruto landed felt just like the first, an explosion of internal damage. Honestly, he didn't know how much longer his body would be able to stand up against such an onslaught. Using a kawarimi to buy himself a moment reprieve, Kakashi was immediately met by a Renkyaku sent to his new location. Avoiding with yet another kawarimi, Kakashi was surprised when this time, Naruto didn't pursue him. Looking to the blonde, he found Jiraiya and Tsunade standing between him and the young man. It looks like our playtime is over, Kakashi-sensei. Naruto practically spat the honorific while indicating the Sannin and approaching chakra signatures of several Konoha shinobi. Thanks Sakura-chan, I needed that. He smiled, tossing her a bell that Kakashi hadn't even realized he'd been relieved of. With a nod to Jiraiya, Naruto disappeared in a swirl of leaves. While the Hokage tended to the multitude of injuries, both external and internal, Kakashi had received, Sakura gave a recounting she had witnessed to the small gathering of shinobi who had appeared at the site. What possessed you to organize such a test? Neither Naruto nor Sakura are under your authority, asked Tsunade in full Hokage mode. I hadn't seen either of my students in the better part of 3 years. I was just excited to see them and was interested to see how much they had progressed in that time. Honestly though, I never expected such improvement. Especially from Naruto. That was a very stupid thing to have done, Kakashi, stated Jiraiya simply. Naruto harbors some deep-seated animosity towards you for our past mistakes, and you just offered him an open invitation to come at you with the intent to kill. You're just lucky he didn't take you up on it. My mistakes? What mistakes? What could I have possibly done to have gained such unrestrained hatred from Naruto? Jiraiya couldn't help but bark out a laugh at that. You honestly are going to tell me that you have no idea why Naruto may have disdain for you? Well, Kakashi, I'm not going to be the one to tell you. You'll have to figure it out on your own and talk to Naruto about it. However, don't expect either of us to step in when that confrontation begins. Confused and speculative whispers began to break out amongst the gathered shinobi, not all of whom were complete strangers to Naruto. In fact, several of them began to excuse themselves from the crowd and moved towards the one location where Naruto could always be found, Ichiraku Ramen. Scene change. Naruto was in fact on his way to said establishment, but was actually moving relatively slowly. Despite having used Shunshin to escape the group of gathering shinobi, he didn't really go very far. His body was protesting his every movement as his muscles slowly began to knit themselves back together. Okay. So maybe he'd overdone it, but it had been totally worth opening 5 of the celestial gates while unleashing Kyuubi's chakra just to see the look on Kakashi's face when he broke from his genjutsu and attacked faster than he could see. It wasn't as if Kakashi didn't deserve it. His past mistakes were plenty enough to warrant the beating he'd issued, but then he had the gall to cast such an illusion on him. Naruto's fists clenched as his anger rose up as he recalled the fight. Flashback. Go ahead and uncover your trump card, I simply won't allow you to view any techniques you can copy. Kakashi chuckled. He had sorely underestimated his opponent. Granting his student's wish, he raised his headband to reveal his Sharingan eye. Very well, Naruto, let's see just how far you've come, said Kakashi, casting Megan Narakumi no Jutsu when he caught Naruto's eye. Now, what Naruto didn't realize nor did Kakashi take into account was the fact that Megan Narakumi no Jutsu is not a jutsu that is controlled by the caster. The illusion produced is a byproduct of the caster's chakra invading the opponent's mind and bringing their greatest current fear or worst memory to the forefront of their mind. For Naruto, this meant that Kakashi disappeared in the swirl of leaves, leaving a figure he hadn't seen in 3 years. Hello Dobi, came the voice of the 12-year-old Uchiha Sasuke. You'll never surpass me. Thanks to Kakashi-sensei's teachings, I'm far beyond your level, and now, I'm going to finish the job I began at the Valley of the End. Taunted the figure charging up a Chidori. Orochimaru will grant me the power I need to destroy him, and once I do, the people of Konoha will welcome me back with open arms for killing 2 of their demons. Naruto's knuckles too red white from being clenched into fists so hard. But before he could even move, the image of his former best friend was upon him. With a squelching sound, Sasuke buried the Chidori into Naruto's chest. Looking down at the arm protruding from his torso, Naruto snapped. In an explosion of Kyuubi's chakra, Naruto threw off the genjutsu and immediately unlocked the fifth gate and attacked Kakashi in a blur of speed. Flashback. Unfortunately for Naruto, during his musings he wandered directly past his destination, directly into a crowd of villagers. With his characteristic yellow hair and unmistakable whisker marks, the villagers couldn't help but notice him. At first he didn't notice the glares or the whispers, but when one of them threw a bottle at him, Naruto broke out of his trance and locked up to find himself surrounded by a decent-sized mob. "What are you doing here, demon?" asked one villager. "Why couldn't you have just stayed away or died?" questioned another. Similar questions old be heard being mumbled throughout the entire crowd. A few of the bigger men stepped forward and cracked their knuckles in what was meant to be an intimidating manner. "I suppose it's our duty to remind you that you're not welcome here," stated the leader, a former chunin, who threw a punch. Unfortunately for the group, Naruto was not in a very charitable mood after his confrontation with Kakashi. Before the fist could connect with Naruto's face, the entire crowd as well as most of the street found themselves completely unable to move as a torrent of killing intent flooded the street. Glowing with a faint red aura, Naruto's whisker marks darkened, his eyes turned red and changed into the slitted eyes of a predator, and his hair darkened to a deep crimson. "This has gone on long enough," he whispered to the now shaking crowd in a deep, terrifying voice. Despite his quiet voice, the words carried just as well as they would have had he yelled them. "You villagers disgust me. If I truly were the demon you all claim me to be, what's kept me from slaughtering the lot of you? If you truly thought I was the Kyuubi, you wouldn't dare to assault me. Instead, you take out your trouble from 15 years ago on an innocent boy. Think for yourselves. I'm either the terrifying demon of your nightmares or a young, defenseless boy you can satiate your anger on. It can't be both. You people are the true demons." And, as suddenly as it had come, the killing intent and demonic chakra vanished and Naruto pushed through the still motionless crowd only to find two groups of people he did not want to see at that moment. Scene change. Having arrived at the Ichiraku ramen stand, the group of young shinobi was surprised to find that Naruto wasn't there. In hurried discussion, they discussed where the missing blonde may be. Through the entrance flap, a portly member noticed a pair of people walking by. "Hey, Shikamaru, Tamari," he called out while exiting to the street, causing the two to turn towards the source of the noise. "Choji," Shikamaru called in excited greeting recognizing his longtime friend. "What are you doing here?" "Naruto's back. We're looking for him," answered the always stoic voice of Shino who exited the restaurant behind Choji. "That's right. Naruto-san's flames of youth are burning brightly. If I cannot find him I shall run 200 laps around Konoha on my hands." Swatting Lee's arm to end his tirade, Tenten greeted the two as Kiba, Akamaru, Hinata, Neji, and Sakura exited the restaurant as well. "Anyo, Naruto-kun's over there," Hinata interjected pointing towards a sizable mob of villagers with her Byakugan activated. Startled by Hinata's addition, the group rushed towards the group, but their trip was cut short as killing intent like nothing any of the group had ever felt washed over them. Unable to even move, they could only stand there and listen to Naruto's speech until the killing intent dissipated and they were able to move again. No sooner had Naruto pushed his way through the crowd to find his friends standing not 5 yards away, did a group of Anbu land next to him. "Uzumaki-san," addressed an Anbu captain with long purple hair, "is everything all right here?" "Yes," spoke Naruto, his eyes never leaving the group of his friends. "It was merely a confrontation that was a long time coming, but as you can see, there has been no violence. Now, please excuse me. I'm in desperate need of something to eat, and I believe I have a lot of explaining to do to the group here," he added, gesturing to the former genin. "Of course, sir," nodded the CA. Tainen with a quick sequence of signs to one of her members, the Anbu-less one departed as silently as they came. Giving a hesitant smile to his gathered friends, Naruto addressed them. "Come on guys. I haven't had Ichiraku ramen in 3 years, my treat. I'm sure you all have plenty of questions for me." And, with that, the group entered for a hot meal and long overdue conversations. After a quick and enthusiastic conversation with the owner Tsuki, Naruto managed to rent out the entirety of the stand for the next couple hours to allow them some privacy. Pushing together some tables, the group got comfortable as Tsuki brought out some ramen. "Other than Tamari, I'm sure you're all wondering just what that was all about out there. Naruto began. Actually Naruto, interjected Shikamaru. It's pretty simple to understand based on what you said out there. The villagers have this troublesome idea that your being the Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi makes you someone onto whom they can alleviate their anger towards the demon that destroyed their lives many years ago. Naruto was actually gaping like a fish when he saw the understanding nods coming from all of those around him. But, how? After you left, that little secret rapidly spread throughout the entire village, ignoring what we now know to be the Sandame's law. No one actually knows who started it, so it's largely gone unpunished, but, on the positive side, most of the shinobi at least recognize the difference between the jailer and the prisoner, added Sakura. Your burden doesn't affect our friendship at all, Naruto, smiled Tenten as the others nodded. Wiping a tear away from his face, Naruto couldn't help but beam at his friends. Thank you, all of you. You have no idea what this means to me. I've kept this secret from all of you for years, afraid of your reaction, he trailed off. Oh, stop being so sappy. Tell us about your travels. Even I only know the beginning of it, interjected Temari when the moment became too sweet for her. Grinning at the sandy blonde, Naruto acquiesced, fine. However, I'm just going to tell you the basics, it'd be a long story otherwise and some of it remains confidential. Say, eyeing the eager looks on the faces around them, he continued. After leaving Konoha, I had radically different expectations for just what the training trip was going to entail than Jiraiya had in mind. I thought it was going to be learning tons of cool and flashy new jutsu while traveling around the continent. Well, at first at least it was relearning jutsu I already thought I knew. It came as a shock to me. But Jiraiya wouldn't teach me a single new jutsu until I had mastered every jutsu I currently knew up to his standards, which, given his personality, are surprisingly strict. I spent the NT trip to Wave in an additional 4 months once we arrived, optimizing Henge, Kawarimi, and Bushin no Jutsu. Tazuna, Tsunami, and Inari are doing fine, by the way, Sakura-chan. It was maddening, Ciali the Bushin no Jutsu, since I never truly learned it once I learned Kage Bushin. That being said, by the end of that time, I could perform each of them without seals and with hardly a thought. Quote, I can understand the usefulness of knowing how to Kawarimi by reflex, but what use is a sealless Bushin? Asked a confused Sakura. I asked him that same question. Flashback. 2 months of working Jiraiya found one very frustrated Naruto. In all of that time, he didn't feel like he had progressed at all. Oh, sure, he was learning, but Jiraiya had yet to teach him anything new. They were arcing exclusively on ninjutsu and only on the jutsu he already knew. Hell, they were still working on the academy jutsu. In 2 months' time, he had only managed to progress past Henge and Kawarimi. Now Jiraiya had him working on Bushin. Not Kage Bushin, mind you, oh no, instead he had him working on his worst skill. After failing for the 1000th time that day to produce a functional clone, he yelled to Jiraiya in exasperation. What the hell is the point of this? I already know Kage Bushin, what would I want to make useless clones? Jiraiya did not look pleased with the boy's question. As not the first time Naruto had complained in his training, but Jiraiya knew he needed to drive his point home to the blonde. Even so, he decided to answer the boy's question. Every skill you learn has a purpose. For you more than anyone. Bushin no Jutsu would be a phenomenal advantage. 2 of the weaknesses of Kage Bushin are that they take large amounts of chakra to create and they can be dispelled with only a single hit. Imagine the advantage of creating an army of Bushin with a subset of Kage Bushin mixed in. For those opponents without a dujutsu, they would be unable to easily differentiate between solid clones and illusions. This would cause them to waste their energy attacking illusions as well as prevent them from knowing which attacks are harmless from the Bushin and which are actual blows from the Kage Bushin. Recognizing the possibilities such a combination would open for him, Naruto grinned and returned to his training with renewed vigor. End flashback. So, being able to perform the technique without hand seals allows me to summon both Bushin and Kage Bushin simultaneously, adding to the effect, concluded Naruto. Even so, while I fully appreciated that project once I managed to learn the skill. At that point I still didn't understand Jiraiya's fixation on what he termed mastering the jutsu. No, I didn't truly understand that until we moved on to Kage Bushin. Flashback. It was nearly another 2 months and a lot of failure, chakra control, and peeping, at least for Jiraiya, before Naruto managed to learn and master Bushin no Jutsu up to Jiraiya's standards. As much as he hated the effort it took to learn, Naruto had to admit it was an effective addition to his repertoire. Alright Naruto, well done. Next, let's work on your Kage Bushin. You've got to be kidding me, old man. I already know Kage Bushin, I've been using it for years. With a frown, Jiraiya added, I'll admit, you've already got a decent grasp on its uses during battle, but you lack understanding of its true purpose. Naruto opened his mouth to argue, but Jiraiya cut himself off. Tell me, why is Kage Bushin classified as a kinjutsu? How the hell am I supposed to know? Being that it's a kinjutsu, I can't just look up that information. The only time I've ever heard of it was when I borrowed the Forbidden Scroll. It's not like I can just do that again. Naruto, make a Kage Bushin and have it follow my clone, said Jiraiya sternly, creating a clone which walked towards the bridge. With a quick Kage Bushin no Jutsu, Naruto followed suit. A few minutes later Naruto yelled out, what the hell, Ero Sanin? If you're going to get caught peeping, don't bring me with you to take the fall. What do you mean, Naruto? I've been standing right here the whole time, said the Jiraiya who was standing a few yards away. I know that, I meant your clone. Naruto was rendered speechless as the implications of Jiraiya's lesson became clear. After about 5 minutes of gaping like a fish at the old toad hermit, Naruto shouted, what the hell? Why didn't you just tell me that to begin with? I wasted months learning those other jutsu when I could have sped up the progress. This is Hi, I said you needed to master your jutsu. This was to make you understand that I actually know what I'm talking about. While yes, you could have accomplished a lot more had I just told you this, maybe now you'll take what I say seriously. Additionally, the reason Kage Bushin is a kinjutsu isn't because of its learning potential, but if one isn't careful, the chakra needed to use it or mental straw. From releasing too many clones at month can kill you. Start packing, we leave tomorrow at dawn, we're going to need more room for your training now. End flashback. As much as I hated the old pervert at the time, he was right, and once I forgave him and accepted that, my training really went much more smoothly. We packed up the next day and actually went to Suna. Once there, life settled into a basic routine, up at dawn. Walk out into the desert, create a lot of clones, send some to train in whatever jutsu Jiraiya assigned or taught me that day, send others to study strategy, bingo books, jutsu, fighting styles, etc. Others to work on my taijutsu, some to practice chakra control, etc. In the meantime, I spent my time improving on the one thing that my clones couldn't change, my physical strength, stamina, and speed. After finishing my morning workout, I took a break for lunch to hang out with Temari, Kankuro, and Gaara whenever they were around. Beyond having a reprieve from my physical activity, it gave me a chance to recover the necessary chakra to summon another large number of clones in the afternoon. Afternoons were basically the same as the mornings, and evenings mainly consisted of saving Jiraiya from whatever mess his peeping got him into. After 6 months, in Suna we packed up and moved on. After that we spent the next 6 months in my mother's home village. Wait, you found out who your mother is? Interrupted Shikamaru. He of course had his own suspicions of who the blonde's parents were, but the chance to confirm them was far too irresistible to pass up. Yeah, I actually found out who both of my parents were in fact. However, I'm sorry Shikamaru, but that's going to have to remain my secret as it's completely confidential, as is where my mother was from. Shikamaru quirked an eyebrow at this, as it fit directly into his best assumptions, but stayed his tongue and turned his attention back to the story at hand. My daily routine stayed relatively similar while there, other than I spent my free time exploring or helping out around the town. After 6 months there, as I said, Jiraiya and I left and began to just wander the continent. At this point, I had improved drastically from when I had left, and the biggest thing I lacked was actual experience, so while we journeyed, Jiraiya and I acted as mercenaries, taking on whatever missions we could find. Beyond that, we were meeting up with a variety of his contacts and of course, visiting every hot spring on the continent. Eventually we finished up out there and headed back home so that I can finally make Chunin. Seeing the grins on the faces of those around him, Naruto asked, What? Kiba's grin broadened as he responded, "Oh, nothing, it's just funny that all of us now outrank you." Shocked by the information, he looked for confirmation on the faces of each of the others. "So, you've all made Chunin." Seeing their nods, he quirked an eyebrow as both Tamari and Neji raised their hands. "Junin," Tamari added with a peace sign and mocking smile. "So is Konkuro. Oh, and Gaara's the Godime Cage." Looking around in disbelief, Naruto asked, "So, I'm the only one who's still a genin?" "No, there's still another of the original Rookie 9 who's still a genin," answered Shikamaru. "But that's just because she's been busy with other duties," added a voice from behind Naruto. "I wondered when you were going to show yourself. I'm glad to see you listen to my advice." Turning, Naruto smiled at the Anbu, Ino. "So, Ino, you're still a genin EY?" asked Naruto with a grin. "Yeah, I told Hokage-sama that I didn't want to take the exams again until you were back since I knew that you'd be in need of a teammate, or two. In the meantime, I began to apprentice my current Anbu captain Azuki Yugo. Once my skills improved enough, I joined the Anbu in her team since I couldn't advance without taking the Chunin exams. Enough about me though, you'll get that story once we're assigned to a team. Why don't you tell us what the deal was in your fight with Kakashi?" Looking down, the smile disappeared from Naruto's face. "How much has Sakura told you guys about our times on Team 7? With a bark of a laugh, Kiba responds, "Other than Sasuke this and Sasuke that and Sasuke's so amazing, we really didn't hear much about your time there." The temperature in the room dropped. Several degrees at the glare Naruto sent Kiba's way. "Well, back when we joined Kakashi's team, that's basically how I feel he approached our training as well. Back then, I was so desperate for people's approval. I thought that Kakashi was the best thing since sliced bread. The mission to recover Sasuke changed my outlook on everything. Sakura-chan, other than the tree climbing exercise, can you name a single thing that Kakashi-sensei ever taught us?" Taking her silent contemplation as a no, he continued, "Neither can I." And yet, even before the Chunin exams, Sasuke was improving steadily. While I know he did some learning on his own, there's no way his skill and ninjutsu repertoire improved in leaps and bounds while ours merely improved at a snail's pace. Then, after the preliminaries, I rushed up to Kakashi-sensei immediately to ask him to train me for the exam. I was facing Hyuga Neji the prodigy after all. Naruto said with a wink towards the stoic Hyuga. Considering that Sasuke was unconscious in the hospital, I was pretty sure I was the first to ask, and yet he decided to completely blow me off in order to train Sasuke. Granted, he did attempt to set me up with another teacher, but, no offense to Ebisu, he's not in the same league as Kakashi. Even Kakashi's training of Sasuke I could have forgiven, especially considering it led to my meeting and subsequent training with Jiraiya. However, the rescue-retrieval mission changed all that. It was bad enough that I was forced to fight my best friend and prodigy of the strongest clan in all the Leaf Sari Neji, Hinata-chan, but I had to do that with him throwing around Lee's taijutsu, Chunin and above-level ninjutsu, Orochimaru's cursed seal, and of course, our teacher's prized personal assassination technique, which he ran me through with, twice. If it wasn't for the fox, I would certainly have died. Even with its strength and healing, I nearly did, all thanks to Kakashi-sensei. Not really having anything to say to this, the group sat in silence, contemplating Naruto's story. For many of them, this was the first time they had heard anything about Naruto's fight with Sasuke. Finally, Hinata broke the silence, asking about something only she had witnessed thanks to her Byakugan. "Naruto, what was that with the villagers earlier? I mean, I know the chakra and killing intent were from the Kyuubi, but what about your hair and your whisker marks? Back when I fought Sasuke in the Valley of the End, in order to keep up with his insane speed and ability, not to mention the boost of power granted to him by the cursed seal, I called on a large amount of Kyuubi's chakra, what I now know to be the maximal amount I was able to then. At the time, I simply let it engulf me and it took the form of a fox around me. While it had some useful properties, it was exceedingly wasteful and difficult to control. During my travels, one of the things I worked on was control over the Kyuubi's chakra, allowing me to summon more of it without succumbing to the side effects of its primal nature. What you saw was the end result. I'm limited in the amount I can summon, and it does a number on my body, not unlike opening the gates. but I can maintain control of myself. Enough about me, Temari, what are you doing in Konoha? Looking back and forth between her and Shikamaru who were sitting next to each other, he got a sly look. Are the two of you on a date? You're joking, why would I go out with such a… As you know, there's a Chunin exam coming up here in Konoha soon. I'm just going back and forth between the sand and leaf for meetings. Responded Temari. And it's troublesome, but I've become an examiner, so I was told to go and see off the messengers from sand. From there on, the meal proceeded with calm, amiable conversation as the friends caught up with each other after 3 years apart. Scene change. Originally, I was going to have Kakashi take over again as Naruto's Junin sensei from now through the exams. But with Naruto's animosity, not to mention Kakashi's injuries, I need someone else. Will you take Kakashi's place? Asked Tsunade to an unnamed Anbu. To take Kakashi-senpai's place. That is indeed an honor. This is not an Anbu mission. You will have to perform this without your mask and I'll be providing you with a code name. For the duration of the mission, your code name shall be, Yamato. I understand. The newly named Yamato affirmed bowing his head. One of the reasons I'm selecting you is, as you know, Naruto is a Jinchuriki and your unique talents may come in handy if he turns out to be too much. While his training with Jiraiya taught him much greater control of Kyuubi's chakra than before he left, he can still be influenced by its primal nature if he channels too much. Don't forget, he did put Kakashi in the hospital using only an amount he could control. Getting a nod from Yamato, she continued, now, we just need to decide on a third member to complete the team. That won't be necessary. A third teammate has already been selected, interjected a voice from behind her. Turning around, she found the speaker to be none other than Danzo, the old Warhawk W. Ho many years before competed with Sarutobi for the title of Sandaime Hokage. Beside Danzo stood the Hokage's advisors, Homura and Kaharu, lending credibility to his statement. Danzo, if you're her, even that means, they must be one of your, nay, from the, root, division of Anbu. Scene change. Over the next several hours, the friends began to trickle out until only Naruto remained, eating his second bowl of ramen and conversing lively with Kyuki and his daughter Ayame. After once again thanking the pair, Naruto paid the bill with a generous tip and left to head home. Stepping out of the tent, he entered the deserted street, only immediately dived to the side to avoid the charge of what appeared to be tiger made entirely from ink. Rolling to his feet, he immediately shot a rankyaku at the beast, which disintegrated into ink upon impact. Now facing another charging tiger, he called wind chakra to his hand and with a call of Shigen, he extended 2 fingers and struck the creature right between the eyes, causing it to also lose form and once again dissolve ink. Having dealt with the problem at hand, Naruto began searching for the source of the attack, but could only see an empty street. Suddenly a figure landed next to him, causing him to tense up until he recognized the presence. He's on the rooftop 1 block over at the end of the street, said the figure before immediately running in the aforementioned direction. Trusting his sudden partner's word, Naruto also ran towards the still unknown assailant, pulling up even with the running Anbu. Reaching the base of the building, a swarm of tigers launched at them from the roof. Naruto, jump back, then get him, I'll handle these, said his assistant, pulling out 2 kodachi. Jumping backwards, he was shocked when, with a cry of Nito Ryu, Tatsumaki, and a quick spin, a dragon-like tornado erupted from her and obliterated the approaching ink beasts. Not having time to admire her handiwork, Naruto jumped to the roof and, pulling out a kunai, attempted to strike the assailant, who blocked with what appeared to be a paintbrush. Who are you? Naruto asked the stranger as he was wearing a leaf headband. You're pretty weak, he responded. Are you sure you even have a penis? With a smirk, Naruto returned with, positive, and simply blew up, causing the unsuspecting nin to go sailing backwards off the roof and through the window of the neighboring building. Bushin Bakua. But I didn't even see him make a clone, he thought to himself, pulling himself out of the hole his entry created. He found Naruto staring at him from the roof he had been on. I'm only going to ask this one more time, who are you? My name's Sai, answered the figure this time. I'm your new teammate. See you tomorrow, Naruto-kun. And, with a swirl of ink, he was gone. Ino, said Naruto, turning to look at the Anbu next to him. Not that I don't appreciate the help, but what are you doing here? Well, until we form our team, I'm still on duty. After your little stunt with the villagers earlier, Yugo Taiko gave me instructions to keep an eye on you the rest of the day and to intervene should another altercation occur. Nodding at that, Naruto couldn't really fault her for following orders. Again, thanks for the assistance, but I'm going to head home now. If we really are going to be getting our team assignment tomorrow, I'm going to need to be well rested to keep myself from killing that little prick. Smiling at her, he continued, you've gotten stronger, Ino. I'm looking forward to seeing what you can do. In a swirl of leaves, he was gone. Smiling at the spot Naruto occupied just a moment before, she too headed home. It ought to be an interesting couple weeks between then and the Chunin exam. Scene change. Brighta. ND early too early in his opinion. The next morning, Naruto trekked to the Hokage's office for the meeting Tsunade set up the previous day. Having met up with both Ino and the mysterious figure Sai the previous day, Naruto had a good idea about what this meeting was going to be about. Sure enough, Tsunade informed him of his new team assignment, being sure to stress that Kakashi would not be his Junin instructor. Something which he was surprised and grateful for. Naruto. Tsunade stopped him as he was leaving the office. Should Kakashi approach you, at least take the time to talk to him before attacking him. No matter your personal feelings, you are both shinobi of the leaf and therefore, comrades. Nodding to the older blonde, Naruto left the office only to run directly into Sakura. Ah, Naruto. She exclaimed, glad to see him. Off to meet your team. Yeah. He nodded enthusiastically. What are you doing here, Sakura-chan? I'm the Hokage's apprentice. I'm here for my daily lesson. Oh, of course. That would explain that freakish strength you showed in the belt test yesterday. Smiling, Sakura nodded. Giving him a quick glance over, she asked, well, I'm sure you need to be going. But do you want to take me out to dinner tonight? You know, for old time's sake. She backpedaled quickly with a light blush. Naruto was shocked. Like, a date. Seeing her nod, Naruto couldn't help but grin. Really? You mean it? Exclamation mark quote. Seeing yet another nod, his smile grew wider. I'd love to, Sakura-chan. However, I'm really not sure what my new sensei's got planned for us. Once I know, about I send a Kage Bushin to let you know. If I can make it, let's plan to meet up at Ichiraku at 6, otherwise, rain check. A tick mark appeared on Sakura's face at the complete lack of respect he was showing her mentor. But restrained herself and simply answered. Sounds good, but should we ever go out again, I expect something other than ramen. Plans made, the two parted ways with identical smiles. Scene change. After leaving the Hokage's office, Naruto didn't really have time to anything other than grab a quick bite to eat ramen of course and then head to training ground 12 to meet up with his new team. Walking into the training grounds, he was surprised to see that, despite being about 5 minutes early, he was the last one there. Shooting a glare towards the new genin, he spoke up, so, it really is you. What was that about last night? Naruto, you know this person? Asked Yamato. Yeah. Answered Ino, he attacked us last night. Sorry about before. I just wanted to gauge the ability of my new team member. I needed to know how much I was going to have to look after the little prick with no balls. What did you say? Shouted Naruto at the clear insult. Grabbing the back of his flak jacket, Ino held him in place. Hey, calm down, he may be a jackass, but he's still our new teammate. Smiling a fake smile at the two, Sai added, I like people like you, useless sluts. With a thunk, Sai looked down to see one of Ino's kodachi protruding from between his legs, held in place by the tip embedded into the stone column he was leaning against. It can be arranged or one member of our team to be missing their balls, she said with a furious look on her face. While, normally Sai would simply smile and insult her, the clear threat and serious look on her face stayed his comments. Ahem, came Yamato's voice from behind them. As you said before, Ino, we are now a team, remove your weapon and save it for your enemies. You may call me Yamato. I will be your Nin instructor at least through the Chunin exam depending on your performance. Seeing their nods and relaxed postures, he continued, I realize that the exam is merely 2 weeks away, so we're going to begin missions immediately. But first, none of us know anything about the others, at least in their fighting ability. Why don't we start with a quick rundown of your abilities? Sai, Why don't you start? My name is Sai. As you all know, I've been en route as long as I can remember and my skill reflects that. I specialize in ink drawing related ninjutsu and genjutsu. With my ninpu, Choju Giga, that you saw last night. I can animate any creature I draw in order to create my own disposable army or spies. My taijutsu isn't my strongest ability, but is sufficient to get me out of poor situations. Nodding at the explanation, Yamato pointed to Ino to go next. My name is Yamanaka Ino. During the past 3 years, I have trained under Azuki Yugo in the art of kenjutsu using kodachi. I entered Anbu squad a little over a year ago. Combined with my Kake Genkai, which enables me to predict a person's movements as well as locate anyone within a kilometer of me, my kenjutsu and family's techniques can be used to much greater effect. As if a light bulb was turned on in Naruto's head, he spoke up, so that's how you were immediately able to locate Sai last night. I didn't know your family had a Kake Genkai. Nodding, Ino answered, it's very rare to manifest. In fact, as far as our records show, I'm the first to manifest mantra in the past 5 generations of my family. Who old have thought the bitch would outclass the runt. Though, I guess that's not too surprising considering, without his balls, the runt may as well be a bitch. What is your freaking problem? Asked Naruto, holding Sai up with one hand by the front of his shirt. Ino had out one of her blades drawn, pointing once again at Sai's nether regions. I'm sorry, Sai stated with a warm smile. I did not mean to offend. This is my first, normal, interaction with other kids my age. Feeling slightly sorry for him, the two let him off the hook and removed the threats to his person. Smiling in what appeared to be thanks, Sai deadpanned, you really believed that apology? We're all as good as dead. Intervening before he had to find a new student, Yamato silenced Sai with terrifying look that none of them has seen before. Yamato-sensei, we need to find another person. I'll never consider someone like him a team member. I'm glad you think of me that way, said Sai, surprising everyone. I wouldn't want to be likened to the weak shit for brains Orochimaru clone who only cared about power and betrayed Konoha by running off to its biggest enemy. Staring hard at Sai, Naruto could detect no deceit in his words. With a smile, he added, you and I may just manage to get along after all. Turning back to Yamato, he continued, as you all know I'm Uzumaki Naruto, Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi no Kitsune. The last 3 years I spent training under. Oh, you really are gay, interjected Sai. Ignoring the play on the double meaning of his own words, Naruto simply continued, or performing missions with Jiraiya of the Sannin. In that time I mastered or created many jutsu of every element, invented my own taijutsu style focusing around my wind elemental affinity, learned to control Kyuubi's chakra, and learned to open the celestial gates. Thanks to Kyuubi's influence, I can open 5 gates without any lasting effect, though that still takes a few minutes to heal. Impossible, stared Sai in shock. No one could learn so much in only 3 years, let alone invent an entire taijutsu style. Between my own chakra reserves, Kyuubi's chakra and healing capabilities, and Kage Bunshin, I was a BLE to accomplish a lot more than the average person. Interesting, thought Yamato. I feel bad for the poor saps in this exam. Very well, I think I've got a general idea on each of your abilities. Enough that I can know what to expect from you. We have little time before now and the exam to truly form you 3 into a team, so we begin our first mission immediately. The Fire Lord would like to be present for the entirety of this year's exam. It is us, along with your former Anbu team, he nodded to Ino, who will be meeting us there, who are responsible for accompanying him here and ensuring his safety. This is an A-rank mission due to the importance of the client and is set to take from now until the day before the exam, so pack accordingly and meet me at the front gate in 2 hours, don't be late. With that, Yamato vanished in a swirl of leaves. After nodding to their 2 teammates, the other 3 went their own ways. The Fire Daimyo was currently visiting a town on the northern border of Fire Country, somewhat east of Konoha on the road one would typically take in order to reach Kumogakure. This was, by normal shinobi pace, about a 2-day trip, but by caravan took approximately 10 days to traverse. With the Chunin exams just 2 weeks away, there was little time to spare on this mission. Arriving at the gate, Naruto found he was the last one there. Giving a simple wave towards Sakura, He leveled a glare in Sai's direction. Please stop staring at me. Sai said simply. It's really unnerving when gay people stare at you like you're a piece of meat. What the hell? Why the hell are you even here? Every damn thing you say just pisses people off. Naruto yelled at him. Hey, came a voice from behind the group. You guys need to knock it off and learn to work together. That is the purpose of this mission after all. Teamwork and cooperation are the most important things in a team. Being that you were on Kakashi-senpai's team, I would have thought you would know that Naruto. It's because he's not a team member. All he has done since the moment I met him is attack me and insult myself and Ino. I'll never consider someone like him a member of my team. Well, I'm glad you think of me that way, said Sai with a smile. The last person you really considered a team member was Uchiha Sasuke, and I wouldn't want to be likened to that shit for brains Orihime. Uru clone who only cared about power and ran off, betraying Konoha for its most notorious missing nin. Ino drew in a sharp breath, expecting an explosion from Naruto. She was, however, surprised when. Instead, Naruto gave a slight smile in Sai's direction. You know, Sai, he said, you and I just may be able to get along after all. With that, he nodded to Yamato, and the team of 4 proceeded out the gates. Scene change. Unfortunately, the tentative camaraderie didn't last. Sai's sharp tongue and insulting comments slowly wore on the group. Regardless, Yamato led them at a breakneck pace. He was pleasantly surprised when, several hours later, none of them had yet to complain. Despite what their files said, he had expected at least one of them to lack the stamina to maintain the pace which he set. Slowing to a stop near a small village, Yamato addressed the group. That's enough for today. We actually made it further than I expected. Come, let us spend the night at the nearby town here. They have excellent hot springs. And nothing breeds companionship like being naked together. A twitch appeared on Ino's forehead. Pervert, she shouted, drawing her kodachi. Backpedaled Yamato quickly. The baths are not unisex, I wasn't implying such indecency. Appeased by Yamato's apologetic tone as well as clarification, Ino was actually looking forward to relaxing in the warm water, not to mention away from Sai. Speaking of Sai, are you sure that's a good idea? I think queerbait over here may enjoy the views too much. Before Naruto could open his mouth to retort, Yamato cut him off. That's enough. You guys may not know me all that well, but while I prefer to be nice and friendly, I have no idea ruling by fear either. He said. Despite being unable to detect it, all 3 in felt Yamato must have been using a genjutsu as his face contorted in a way that instilled fear in each of them. Scene change. Soon enough, the group found themselves relaxing in the hot springs. You see, said Yamato addressing Naruto and Sai, for guys, there's nothing like being naked together to make us feel like companions. Turning towards them, he unleashed his terrifying face, don't you agree? Of course, said Naruto, just wanting to get that look directed elsewhere. Well, you really do have one, said Sai, completely ignoring Yamato. Turning towards him, Naruto found him tarring directly into the water at his lap. Don't go, Lu. Naruto began to scream at the boy before he noticed Sai's shocked, gaping expression. He also couldn't help but notice the other boy subconsciously crossing his legs. Anger forgotten, Naruto burst out laughing. Scene change. The next morning, the group left the small village and set out again. Despite having been brought closer by their time at the hot springs, the group dynamics hadn't really changed. Sai still continually insulted everyone, Naruto and Ino continually threatened with bodily harm, and Yamato would intervene, allowing Sai to remain a man. After the third occurrence that morning, Yamato had enough. Even the threat of his terrifying face wasn't enough to prevent the squabbles. Okay, that's it. Despite your individual skills, you are still a team, and need to be able to work together for this mission, the exam, and as a shinobi. Before we go any further, we're going to do a team building exercise. Here's what we're going to do. Your goal is to defeat me, but each of you will be limited in what you can do. Naruto, you may only use genjutsu and weapons. Ino, you may only use ninjutsu and nothing involving your blades. Finally, Sai, you may only use taijutsu. With only your weakest skill at your disposal, you will be forced to rely on your teammates for help. Now, let's begin. With that said, Yamato shunshined away. letting his students find him when they were ready. After a moment, Ino broke the silence. As much as I hate to say it, this is a good exercise. With my Kake Genkai, it won't be a problem to find him. He's about 100 yards that way, she said, indicating with her finger. Guys, I don't know any genjutsu, I have absolutely no talent for them. Added Naruto. Great, so your skill in jutsu is only less pathetic than your skill in the bedroom. You're going to be a big help. Glaring at the other boy, Naruto turned his attention to Ino when she spoke up. You can use any weapons you have though, so you can still help. We're all well-trained shinobi, why don't we just play this by ear? Sai, you engage Yamato-sensei in taijutsu and Naruto and I will assist you when we can. Against a shinobi of Yamato's class. Simply fighting him blind with this much of a disadvantage will get us nowhere. Taking charge, Naruto instructed, the two of you try force him into this clearing. I'll have a surprise waiting for him here. Once it's set up, I'll assist you. Nodding at the idea, Ino and Sai left the clearing to engage their target. Smiling at the clear display of teamwork despite Sai's off-color statement, the Moku Bunshin Yamato left fused with a nearby tree, returned to the Anbu captain and shared the kid's plan with him. Let's see if those two have the skills necessary to pull it off. No sooner had he thought that he was forced to dodge a sword thrust from Sai, who dropped down in front of him. Pulling out a kunai, Yamato engaged Sai in a light taijutsu kenjutsu match. After only a few seconds, the difference in the two was clear and Yamato was proven to be the superior, kicking Sai away from him without the boy landing a strike. Sensing Ino behind him, Yamato drew Mped away, hoping to avoid whatever jutsu she was planning. Unfortunately for him, her mantra predicted his movement, allowing her to catch him in mid-jump. Kaden, Heiken, she called out, thrusting her fist forward. A column of fire launched at the still airborne Yamato. Unable to dodge, Yamato flashed through hand seals of his own, calling out, Mokuten, Moku Shoheki no Jutsu, a half-dome of Woodaru. PTED from the ground, shielding him from Ino's flame attack. Eyes wide, Ino could only stare at the barrier that blocked her attack. Mokuten. But how? I thought only the Shudai Hokage could use such a technique. Sai, recovering from Yamato's blow, resumed his assault, preventing Yamato from taking advantage of Ino's lapse in concentration. Unlike Ino, Danzo had informed him before the mission of Yamato's talent. So seeing it was not a surprise. Still unable to compete with Yamato in taijutsu, Sai found himself quickly on the defensive until another, Kaden, Heiken, from Ino forced Yamato to kawarimi rather than press his assault. Charging at Ino while forming hand seals, he closed the distance between them and with a call of, Mokuten, Shichiro no Jutsu, 4 walls of wood sprung up around Ino, trapping her within. Turning to defend against a charging Sai, Yamato was surprised to hear, Mewtwo Ryu, Tatsumaki, from behind him. The walls of his wooden prison were ripped from the earth and sent careening through the air, releasing Ino from within. Yamato himself was not completely spared the jutsu's wrath and he was sent tumbling head over heels. Rolling to his feet, he blocked another sword strike from Sai. The two battled for dominance for a moment before Yamato released the force he was putting into holding the stalemate, allowing the sword strike to continue, and merely changed its direction. Sai, not expecting such a maneuver, lost his footing. Before Yamato was able to press his advantage, ninja wire wrapped around him and a call of, Kaden, Ryuka, from Ino, the wire was set ablaze as fire so dense it appeared almost liquid rushed towards the bound Yamato. When the blaze died down, only a smoking log in the vague shape of a person remained. Having recognized that the wire that had previously bound him came not from Ino, but a still concealed Naruto, Yamato took the chance to hide himself rather than attacking as he had in the past. Using her mantra, Ino immediately uncovered Yamato's location and used another, Kaden, Heiken, to alert her teammates and steer Yamato on their desired course. Jumping to his right to avoid the flames, Yamato immediately discovered his mistake as a wire snapped and the air was immediately full of kunai. Once again using calling out, Mokuten, Moku Shoheki no Jutsu, the familiar half-dome appeared, blocking the approaching kunai. While shielded from the kunai storm, the barrier he erected also served to block his escape when Ino appeared next to him. Before he could push an attack, she called out, Mewtwo Ryu, Tatsumaki, as she spun herself in place. As before, a gale of wind spun around her. This time, with no buffer, it slammed into him like a ton of bricks, tossing him around like a rag doll until he landed in the midst of the original clearing. Regaining his bearings, Yamato flipped in midair to get his feet below him. However, the moment he landed, wire-toting explosive notes sprung up from the ground and wrapped him up, preventing him from moving or making seals. Relieved to see that the explosive notes were the kind which had to be activated by the user, and these weren't smoking, he looked up to see the tip of Sai's katana. With a grin, he said, "I concede." Scene change. The rest of the trip passed uneventfully and the team reached the home of the daimyo of Fire Country without any incident. Unfortunately for all of them, despite their team-building exercise, the team dynamics didn't change at all. It seemed that unless in the midst of battle, Sai refused to remain civil with his teammates. Staying overnight, the team woke early the next morning and, after confirming that the caravan was prepared to leave, awaited the arrival of Azuki Yugo and the rest of her Anbu team. When the scheduled meeting time came and went with no sign of the Anbu, Ino reached out with her mantra searching for the missing team. They're about half a kilometer away, but they're not moving in this direction. In fact, they're not moving at all. Turning to the head of the daimyo's personal guards, Yamato said, "My team and I will investigate. Once we return, we will set off towards Konoha." With a nod to his team, they set out following Ino's lead. Less than a minute later, they arrived at the location Ino indicated. The scene before them was not one any of them were prepared for. Lying sprawled across the field were the broken bodies of Ino's former team. The fact that Ino was able to locate them with her mantra told the group that they were still alive, but each of the 5 had serious injuries: broken bones, burns, and still bleeding wounds. Scanning with her mantra confirmed that there were no figures nearby. Who could have done such a thing? Asked a shocked Ino as they worked to treat the injuries as best they could with their limited medical knowledge and small supply of bandages and creams all shinobi carried. Yugo stirred at the sound of Ino's voice and in a whispered voice choked out, "Uchiha, Sasuke." While the majority of people in the Anbu program were Chunin rank or ability, all Anbu captains were Junin. Yugo's team specifically was comprised of 2 Junin, herself included, and 3 Chunin, each of whom was scheduled to take the Junin exams that year. To find all of them beaten to within an inch of their lives within Fire Country by a single shinobi was both shocking as well as disconcerting. For Ino, the situation was even more terrifying as she had first-hand experience of strength of the Leaf Shinobi involved. Yugo, in particular, was an incredibly strong Noichi acclaimed almost as highly as Yamato and Kakashi. Despite her flaring emotions, Ino's training kicked in and she began searching for Sasuke with her mantra. "He's not within my range," she notified her team. Realizing that attempting to pursue him was pointless, Naruto, whose anger was palpable after hearing the Yugo's words, relaxed slightly, concentrating more on his work than preparing to battle. After finishing patching the last member of the team to the best of his ability, Naruto noticed Ino's tense and distraught demeanor. Placing a hand comfortingly on her shoulder, he said, "It'll be okay, Ino. They're all going to make it through this." Looking at him, Ino gave him a half-hearted smile and thanks. "Let's get them back to the daimyo's home. They can ride in the caravan for the trip back." With a nod, Naruto created several clones, each of which picked up one of the now patched Anbu members and began to walk back to where they came from, Yamato and Ino right behind them. Sai T railed back for a moment, thinking back to Danzo's final instructions to him for this mission. Flashback. Danzo-sama, I am to leave immediately to accompany the daimyo to Konoha to watch the Chunin exams. Smiling at his subordinate, Danzo replied, "I know, I was the one to ensure you were sent on this mission. I had been planning this for some time now. This mission will put you close to the border of Fire Country. I have recently managed to make contact with Orochimaru. He is expecting some documents from me. On this mission, you are to deliver this to him." Danzo told him, holding out a stuffed manila envelope which Sai took. "How am I to make contact with him?" "You won't be making direct contact. Not with that girl's Kekai Genkei around. Orochimaru said that he would leave you a clear our message and to simply leave it where indicated. It's time that the root of Konoha takes hold." End flashback. Checking that his team was not paying attention, Sai removed the folder from a secret pocket of his uniform and dropped it to the ground. Turning to follow his team, Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a snake emerge from the soil, pick up the folder in its mouth and disappear into the forest. Smiling at completing his task, he quickly caught up to the others. Scene change. After returning to the home of the daimyo and getting the Anbu medical attention from his medic Nins, the CA, Raven set out for Konoha noticeably tenser than before the discovery of the injured Anbu team. It wasn't until 2 days later that the members of Yugo's team awoke cognizant enough to tell them what occurred. Running into Sasuke was no accident. Yugo began. He knew we were coming. Hell, he was waiting for us. Flashback. Coming to a halt in surprise, the Anbu team stared in shock at the figure blocking their path. It was Uchiha Sasuke, prodigy of his generation, possessor of the Sharingan, and traitor to Konoha. He was standing with his hands in his pockets, not even looking at the ANB. U-team, though it was clear that he knew they were there. He looked much the same as the last time any of those present had seen him in the Chunin exam finals. Taller now, his hair was longer, though. The 2 bangs still framing either side of his face. The most notable difference was the outfit he now wore. Loose white shirt tucked into dark pants held up by the purple rope that Orochimaru is so famous for, with a katana attached diagonally behind him. "It's about time you got here," he stated simply. Uchiha Sasuke. Yugo addressed him. "For crimes against Konoha you must come with us." "I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for one thing, to test myself," came the emotionless response as he unsheathed his katana, black marks of the cursed seal spreading across his face. Drawing her own katana, Yugo signaled her team to attack. As Yugo jumped forward to engage Sasuke directly, the rest of her team broke off to their assigned roles for such a fight. As she approached, she slipped into a stance with the sword held parallel to the ground, tip resting on the thumb of her left hand pointed towards her opponent. As the distance closed to about half of what it started, she called out, "Gatatsu," thrusting the blade forward in what appeared to be a stabbing motion. A bullet of chakra launched itself from the tip of her sword, rushing at Sasuke at rapid speeds. Twisting to avoid the attack, Sasuke heard, "Kaden, Gukaku no Jutsu," and found himself in the path of a large fireball. This was one of the standard attack patterns for Yugo's team and, as always, they were performing it flawlessly. Sharingan blazing, Sasuke flashed through hand seals of his own casting, Fuden, Kami Oroshi. A vortex of wind traveled from Sasuke directly at the approaching fireball. Unable to go upwind, the fireball changed direction, increasing in size thanks to the fanning of the flame by the wind. Dodging as quickly as possible, the caster of the flame jutsu was unable to fully avoid his own amplified jutsu, and he received some painful burns for his failure. Not giving Sasuke to go on the offensive, all 3 female members approached Sasuke the moment the fireball was no longer attacking him. Coming in high, Yugo went for a cross slash, attempting to cleave Sasuke from his shoulder to his waist, while each of the others went for their own strike with kunai. Blocking the katana strike, Sasuke called out, "Sene Tajashu." A dozen snakes emerged from his other sleeve, coiling around the arms of the other 2 attacking women, halting their attacks and holding them in place. He followed up with, "Chidori Nagashi." As lightning surged from his entire body, striking all 3 Anbu members in range, electrocuting and burning them, leaving them temporarily paralyzed at his feet. Before he could press his advantage, a muffled, Doden, Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu, was heard below him, and he jumped backwards as a hand came shooting out of the ground beneath him, seeking his leg. The moment his feet touched the ground, he ducked and spun to his right to avoid a hail of kunai and shuriken from the final member of the team. Catching his eye, Sasuke cast a genjutsu on him, making him believe that he had been stabbed through by Sasuke's blade. As the nin dropped to his knees and screamed in perceived pain, Sasuke turned his attention to the final standing Anbu who had just attacked him below and flashed through several hand seals, and with a Fuden, Daitapa, all 5 Anbu were sent tumbling by a massive concussion of wind, crashing heavily back down to earth, breaking bones. Turning to leave, Sasuke was surprised to hear movement behind him. He turned back to see Yugo pull herself back to her feet. Picking up her discarded blade and drawing a second, she rushed him in a flurry of strikes. Proving why she was so well respected, Yugo actually began to push Sasuke back, even with his Sharingan, with her superior speed and Kenjutsu. With one final thrust she broke his guard and her sword pierced his chest. Looking at the skewered log at the tip of her blade, she looked around for the missing nin. You're better than anticipated, she heard Sasuke say from her left. 2. Rning to face him she saw the last of his skin covered in the cursed seal forming a cross-shaped mark over his nose. His skin was now dark, his nails had lengthened, and like some sort of monster he had 2 wings extending from his back. But this is as far as you go. She knew all about the cursed seal having learned of its capabilities from the Hokage after the Sasuke retrieval mission. With the information in mind and considering the relatively even ground they had been fighting on, she knew she had little chance of winning this fight now if it dragged out. Her only chance was to try to end it with the next attack. Nito Ryu, Nanaju Pound who fired a slash of wind towards her opponent who, as she expected, dodged. Already in motion, she was upon him immediately and with a cry of Karazuma Gari. She unleashed a multi-hit combo on Sasuke who, in a blur of speed, blocked every blow. The final result was a deadlock with Sasuke easily blocking both of her swords with his one own. With a whispered, Chidori Iso. A blade of lightning extended from his unoccupied hand, piercing her abdomen. Immediately the strength left her as she felt blood leaving her body at a rapid rate. Not showing mercy on his opponent, Sasuke unleashed a multitude of taijutsu strikes on her limp body, eventually dropping her unconscious form next to her comrades. End flashback. Scene change. The rest of the trip passed without incident, and despite her constant searching, Ino never once could locate Sasuke with her mantra. Arriving in Konoha, mission completed, Yamato released the 3 genin telling them to get some rest. For the Chunin exams were set to begin in 2 days. The mood in the Hokage's office was tense as Tsunade listened to Yugo's recount of the fight with Sasuke. She had, of course, met the caravan at the gates to greet the daimyo and, after seeing to his every need, ordered the Anbu and Yamato to her office for a debriefing. Despite the gravity of the situation, as a medic, Tsunade first checked over the team for any injuries, healing any that had been overlooked or not completely healed. And that's what happened, Hokage-sama, concluded Yugo. Glancing around the room to find the rest of the members nodding to her in confirmation of the story, Tsunade sighed. Thank you, Yugo. I'm sorry you and your team were injured. Take the next day off, but I need each of you ready for the Chunin exams. Hi, Hokage-sama, the Anbu team saluted and left. Turning to Yamato, Tsunade said, I need you to update the bingo book. While AC rank may have suited Sasuke when he first defected to sound. If I'm to believe Yugo's report, Uchiha Sasuke must now be treated as a powerful, hostile threat. As Hokage, I declare Uchiha Sasuke an A- rank missing nin to be killed on sight. Scene change. 9 days before Naruto and company returned to Konoha, in a dark room of an underground fortress sat a solitary figure. Welcome back, Sasuke-kun, it said, turning to look at T. He shadow that had silently entered his chambers. Taking in the appearance of his subordinate and future vessel, Orochimaru couldn't help but smirk. Not a scratch on him. Against 5 seasoned shinobi, and they called me a genius. At his age, even I would have fallen to him. Here is the folder, Sasuke said, simply dropping the folder on the table next to Orochimaru. Now, teach me the jutsu you promised me. Kukuku, patience, Sasuke-kun, patience, he chided. I have a couple things to take care of, I shall show you in a bit. With a frown, Sasuke turned to leave. I'll be in the training room. I would suggest you hurry unless you wish to lose some of your precious few junin. Orochimaru couldn't help but lick his lips in appreciation. He truly loved that boy. He had a mean streak that old rival his own, and his one-track mind caused him to train tirelessly, sculpting him into the perfect host for Orochimaru. Soon, he thought, turning his attention to the files Sasuke had delivered. Opening the envelope, Orochimaru began to scan the documents enclosed. His eyes widened. Oh yes, this was perfect. Standing, he moved out of his chambers. He had events to set in motion. Scene change. Staring down at the file, the massive robed figure couldn't suppress a twinge of excitement. While he may not like the self-appointed Otokage, the man was incredibly good at obtaining information. Information that not even the best of his spies could catch whispers of. While he wouldn't trust the snake as far as he could throw him. Turning to his attendant, the Raikage ordered, "Get Ni Yugito immediately." There was little time to prepare, but it looked as though he would be sending a team to Konoha's Chunin exam after all. Scene change. At around the same time, in another part of the world. The news brought by the Otokage was not met with the same enthusiasm. "Impossible!" shouted an imposing figure. Rushing into the office at his superior's shouts, the attendant found the normally unflappable Tsuchikage seething in anger. His desk lay in ruins. "What is it, sir?" asked the attendant. Tossing the file to his most trusted advisor, the Tsuchikage said, "I will be taking my team to Konoha for the exams. That man's blood must be wiped from this earth." Scene change. The day before the Chunin exam, Naruto woke early in excitement. No, he wasn't excited about the exam and his nearly guaranteed promotion. No, it wasn't that he was once again back in Konoha. No, today was his first ever date with one Haruno Sakura. With time to spare before he was to meet Sakura for lunch, Naruto decided to simply wander the town a bit. Though he'd only been back for a day, Naruto could already clearly tell that his confrontation with the villagers when he first returned from his training trip spread throughout the village. Rather than the hate-filled glares he was used to receiving, he found fear in the eyes of most and, in a small subset, apology and shame. None had the gall to approach him. But the change in attitude surrounding him was a pleasant one. Making his way leisurely to his team's training ground, Naruto's keen eyes noticed many shinobi from different villages apparently in Konoha for the exams. Forming the familiar cross-shaped hand seal, Naruto was just about to form some clones to work on some various tasks for him. Sensing someone behind him, he turned to find none other than Yamanaka Ino. Smiling at her he said, "Ino-chan, what brings you here?" Quirking an eyebrow at the new suffix, Ino responded in turn. "What am I doing here? What are you doing here? Don't you have a big date soon?" Chuckling, he continued their little game of questions. "Sakura told you, huh?" Seeing her nod he continued. "Yeah, we're going to Ichiraku in about an hour. So I repeat, what are you doing here? Surely you're not planning on training beforehand." She posed the last statement as a question with a dangerous look in her eye. No, of course not." Naruto backpedaled. Quote, "I was just coming out here to make some clones to work on a few projects of mine while I did other things today." Slapping herself in the forehead, Ino rounded on him. "Now, you listen here, mister," she yelled. "Doing something so rude is unacceptable. I will not allow you to ruin this for her." Looking him up and down she growled, "And surely you weren't planning on wearing that." Looking down at his attire, Naruto didn't know what to say. "What do you mean, I always wear this?" "Exactly," she said, getting exasperated. "You have to dress up, wear something different to show that you care." Seeing the clueless expression on his face, she grabbed him by the front of his jacket and began to pull him along behind him. Scene change. Just over an hour later, Naruto found himself seated in front of the hospital waiting for Sakura to get on her break. The previous 60 minutes was a swirl of colors and fabric as Ino took him on his first ever shopping with a girl experience. And so, it was a da-zed Naruto that Sakura found waiting for her. Noticing the look on his face and the new attire he had on, she couldn't help but laugh. "Let me guess, Ino." Noticing her for the first time, he turned and with a sheepish smile said, "Yeah, that girl's a nightmare. Are all girls so terrifying when shopping?" Laughing at him, she slugged him lightly on the shoulder. "Don't call her a nightmare, she's a good friend. Besides, you look great, she did you a favor." "You look great too, Sakura-chan," he said, automatically making her smile. Then, actually looking at her attire, he noticed she too had dressed up for their date. With a smile, he silently thanked Ino for her assistance. "Really though, what's the occasion?" he asked with a wink indicating her outfit. With another laugh and slap on the arm, the two headed to Ichiraku. Scene change. Entering the tent, Naruto couldn't help but grin. While training with Jiraiya, he had managed to kick his complete dependence of the stuff, as far as he was concerned. Ramen remained the single greatest food on the planet. Waving towards the friendly old owner, Tuki and his daughter, he steered Sakura towards a table in a corner where they could have some privacy. Passing a group of cloud nins, Naruto had a peculiar feeling. Turning to look at the group more closely, when he focused on the sandy blonde-haired Junin with them, and he could hear Kyuubi inexplicably growling in his cage. Unable to contain himself, Naruto uttered a deep, quiet growl. As if sensing his eyes on her, which likely, she did, the kunoichi turned to him and snarled at him with a raised lip. With a light tug on his arm from Sakura, the moment passed and both looked away, turning back to their respective business. "What was that?" asked a surprised Sakura. Blinking, he answered, "Sorry about that. I honestly have no idea. I've never seen her before. But, there's just something about her that rubs me the wrong way." Still unable to fully shake the feeling of aggression the kunoichi inspired. "It's strange though, I didn't think Cloud Nins attended our Chunin exams, at least, not since the Hyuga incident." Shrugging, Sakura replied, "That's true, but it's not like they're not invited. It's been over 10 years, I suppose it was bound to happen eventually." "Yeah," said Naruto, his thoughts interrupted by the waitress coming to take their order. With the moment passed and the hairs on the back of his neck settling again, Naruto turned the conversation back towards topics more befitting a date. "So, Sakura-chan, you heard about my journeys, but I've yet to hear about how you spent the last few years. Fill me in." Smiling at the question, she obliged. "Well, for the sake of time, I'll give you the short version. After you left, I was the only remaining member of Team 7 still in Konoha. For the sake of team dynamics, I was assigned to Team 10. Although, we were really only a team in name, we never took missions together or anything. Ino and I had a long discussion the day after you left. We both realized that our approach to shinobi life up to that point just wasn't cutting it. In the end, I approached Tsunade Shisho and basically demanded to be made her apprentice and, for whatever reason, she accepted. Training under Tsunade Shisho was brutal, but I certainly can't fault the results. Sadly, between my training and Ino's own, we missed the next two Chunin exams. Those were both held in Kurigakure and only Neji and Shino made Chunin that year, even though Lee finally beat Neji in their fight in the finals. It wasn't until the exams in Higakure when Tsunade Shisho actually allowed me to participate in the exams again. Since Ino was content in her Anbu duties and decided to wait for your return to take the exams again, Choji and I joined Tenten under Gai-sensei for the exam. I actually managed to get to the finals in that exam, defeating a grass nin in the preliminaries. It's a good thing I had Tsunade Shisho's training in med. Ikal jutsu or the poisons she used would have done a lot more damage." Sakura laughed, thinking back on the look of shock the grass kunoichi showed as she removed the poison-tipped Senbon with apparently no ill effects. "Unfortunately, my first match in the finals, I fought Hinata. She and Lee made Chunin that exam and I learned firsthand just why the Jiyukin is so feared. I made Chunin along Wit Kiba in the next exam, which was held in Suna. I actually won the tournament-style finals, beating Kiba for the title." She made a peace sign sticking out her tongue in victory. "After that, I've mainly spent my time training with Tsunade Shisho and working in the hospital. I've actually started thinking about taking the Junin exams soon." "Wow, Sakura-chan!" exclaimed an impressed Naruto when she finished. "That's amazing. You've really become strong, haven't you?" Her eyes shining with emotion, Sakura nodded and said with conviction, "Yeah, I've been training hard. Next time I see Sasuke-kun, I will bring him back to Konoha." Quote. The smile on Naruto's face immediately disappeared and his voice gained a dangerous edge to it. "You should really forget about that traitor. If I have anything to say about it, the only way he'll be coming back to Konoha is in a body bag." Looking as though she'd been slapped, Sakura faced Naruto. "How can you say such a thing? He was your best friend. We're supposed to bring him back and reunite Team 7. Was being the key word," spat Naruto, opening his shirt. "There are some wounds that never heal and cannot be forgiven," he said, indicating the scar adorning his chest above his heart. Anything more that the two may have had to say was cut short as a massive killing intent washed over them. Instantly on alert, shinobi senses going into overdrive, Naruto dropped into his taijutsu stance and turned towards the source of the killing intent. At the entrance to the tent stood a very tall man covered entirely in what appeared to be red battle armor comprised entirely of straw. On his back was a turnip-shaped protrusion from which smoke was issuing. His head was covered by red sacket and the lower part of his face covered in a fashion similar to Kakashi. The only part of his face exposed were his golden eyes, which were at that moment blazing in anger at Naruto. "What?" asked Naruto. "Who are you and what do you want?" "What do you want?" Your days are numbered, Uzumaki. Ground out the rock nin through clenched teeth, identifiable by the headband tied around his forehead, through clenched teeth. Quirking an eyebrow at the manner in which the mystery shinobi said his name. Naruto simply held his gaze. Without another word, the shinobi turned and exited the tent. Niyugito frowned. She had initially been excited to find the ramen stand. She would be the first to admit that the noodly goodness was her one vice. But, ever since that boy had entered, all of her senses were on edge, the feline in her screaming to fight or flee. The feeling had gotten far worse when the rock nin had entered. There was something inexplicable about both of them that immediately got under her skin without even speaking a word to either. She couldn't shake the feeling that her mission has just gotten much more complicated. Adrenaline wearing off as the rock nin left, Naruto turned back to Sakura, who was still sitting stock still looking at the scar on his chest. I'm not the same naive kid I used to be. Sasuke betrayed all of us in Konoha. The sooner you let go of your fantasy of him, the better off you'll be. Nearly in tears at Naruto's words, Sakura said, I really need to get back to the hospital. Thanks for lunch. With that, she excused herself and rushed out of the stand. Sighing to himself at how quickly things had gone downhill, Naruto excited as well. Only to collide with something soft and, in a tangle of limbs, end up sprawled on the street. Looking down, he found that he was now lying on none other than Hyuga Hinata. Extricating himself from her quickly, he pulled himself to his feet and offered her his hand to help her up. Sorry about that, Hinata-chan, didn't see you there. Naruto offered up weakly in apology. It's fine, she stammered out, embarrassed. What are you doing here anyways, Hinata-chan? Hinata blushed. In truth, she had reverted to her old habits of following Naruto. She had mixed emotions about eyeing him on what appeared to be a date with Sakura. While she certainly wished she was the one out with Naruto, she was glad to see him happy. She had come a long way in 3 years. Now a respectable chunin, she still had her kind heart, but was far more sure of herself than she had once been. Even so, she didn't want to admit her reason for being there. However, after seeing the group of Cloud Nin with her Byakugan, she actually did have a matter to talk to him about. I actually have a favor to ask of you, Naruto-kun, she said, moving to a more secluded area of the street and motioning for him to follow. Not many people know this, but my sister, Hanabi, will be taking part in this year's Chunin exam. Normally, I would never ask this of you, she's a strong girl who is quite capable of taking care of herself. However, could you possibly just keep an eye on her? As I'm sure you're aware, my family's not had very good relations with Kumogakure. With Cloud Nins in this exam, she could be in real danger. Of course, Hinata-chan, not a problem, he responded with a warm smile. Despite herself, his smile melted her composure, causing her to blush, look down, and begin to poke her fingers together. Thank you Naruto-kun, she stuttered. Don't worry about it. Anyways, I'm out of here, I've got some things to take care of before tomorrow. With a wave, he vanished. Despite Hai's keen observational skills and training with Jiraiya, Naruto was still clueless when it came to women. Scene change. Meanwhile, in the Hokage Tower. It's a pleasure to meet you, Tsuchikage-sama. Nate addressed the man who had just entered her office. Unlike the Hokage's robes, the Tsuchikage was covered head to toe in black robes, only his eyes could be seen through a narrow slit below his hat. In truth, she had no idea who the man was. The Yondaime, Namikaze Minato, had killed the Sandaime Tsuchikage during the Third Great Shinobi War, something which had gone a long way towards ending the war, and his replacement still remained a mystery. You as well, Hokage-sama, he replied equally respectfully. Not that I don't enjoy your company, but I was not expecting to see you here for these stages of the exam. It's highly unusual for another Kage to enter the hosting village unless their shinobi make it to the finals, she replied respectfully but at the same time accusatorily. Please Hokage-sama, chided the other Kage. I mean no disrespect. I am merely here accompanying my team. I have been teaching them since they became genin, and as their teacher, I felt compelled to watch them through these tasks like any Junin sensei. Despite the friendly tone and sound reasoning, Tsunade remained cautious. It was just far too coincidental for the first Cloud Nin teams to enter Con. OHA held exams in 10 years as well as the last-minute addition of the Tsuchikage's personal team to occur in a single exam. Of course Tsuchikage-sama, she replied, having to maintain appearances. I hope you enjoy your stay in Konoha. Let me know if there is anything I can do for you. Thank you for your hospitality Hokage-sama. I look forward to these exams, they should prove most interesting. Scene change. The next morning, Naruto met his team outside the academy and were on their way inside when Naruto was met by an unwelcome face. Motioning to his team to continue without him, Naruto turned to the figure. Why are you here Kakashi-sensei? Asked Naruto. Raising his hands in a placating manner, Kakashi simply said, I'm just here to offer you good luck. I've come to realize that I do not deserve to call myself your teacher, but as your one-time superior, I wish you the best. Should you desire my aid in training for the finals, please let me know. I've made mistakes with you in the past that I cannot correct. But I do hope that we can at least be civil with each other in the future. With a nod at the gesture, Naruto proceeded inside and up to the second floor. He was reminiscing about his last time taking this exam until he stepped out onto the second floor landing and found a truly interesting sight. In the middle of the hall stood Ino with two young men unconscious at her feet and a crowd of genin huddled as far from her as possible. You do realize that this was just a test to eliminate those two green for the exams, right? He asked her, indicating the two unconscious forms. Sure, but they attacked me when I laughed at the performance they were giving. She grinned. Besides, I don't mind a bit more competition, do you? Sighing, he motioned for them to follow and proceeded to walk up to room 301. Entering, Naruto noticed that not much had changed in the 3 years he was gone. The room was still packed with genin from various countries, most of which looked nervous and on edge. These were the ones that no one of note paid attention to. No, it was the shinobi who appeared to have not a care in the world that would be the dangerous ones. Despite knowing that he was far above Chunin level, Naruto couldn't help but scope out those who fit this profile. A few jumped out, including both teams from Kumo and the team from Iwagakure with the shinobi who ran into Naruto yesterday. The latter of which was glaring at Naruto and, if looks could kill, he would have ceased to exist. Hey bro, came a voice from behind him. Konohamaru, what are you doing here? Asked Naruto. Duh, the Chunin exams. My team and I got nominated. We're the only rookie team participating this year, he said, indicating his two teammates. Congratulations, Naruto replied, making a mental note that Konohamaru and Hyuga Hanabi were on the same team. You must have really grown up in the last 3 years if you think you can compete in the same exams with someone as awesome as me. Laughing at Naruto's feigned narcissism, he responded, yeah, well, I'll try not to show you up too badly. Before anything more could be said, with a boom and a puff of smoke, a grow up of Konoha shinobi headed by none other than Nara Shikamaru appeared. It's time. From here on, there will be no fighting until I say so. Anyone who breaks this rule will fail immediately, no exceptions. Everyone, follow me. The Chunin exams have now begun. The first test of the Chunin exam began familiar enough. Just like last time Naruto attended, each person was designated to a seat in a large auditorium separated from the rest of their teammates. And, much like last time, he was handed a paper test which was designed to test their knowledge and reasoning. Unlike last time, however, he was not in the least bit worried. Having expected such a routine, Naruto had hatched a plan. You may begin at any time, but I would highly recommend that you listen to my instructions first, began Shikamaru once everyone was prepared. The rules to this test are a bit different from those you've had in the past. I'm not going to write these down, nor will I allow any questions, so pay close attention. Despite your seating arrangements, this is a team exam. You will either pass or fail as a team, no exceptions. There are 10 questions to this exam, each question being worth 1 point. I absolutely cannot tolerate cheating, so should one of our proctors catch you, he indicated the seated Junin lining the aisles, your team will lose 4 points. Should any member's possible score reach 0 during the test, the entire team fails. That's right, getting caught cheating will not only destroy your own chances, but those of your teammates. As shinobi trying to reach the rank of Chunin, be proud ninjas. This exam will last 2 hours, but I will only reveal the 10th question after the first hour has passed. Glancing around the room he added, for those of you who were here 3 years ago. I would recommend you not confuse myself with Marini Ibiki. Seeing the overconfident expressions drop off a few faces at that he smirked. Very well, begin. Turning the paper over, Naruto smiled. Sure enough, he was completely unable to answer even a single question. Despite the fact that his time with Jiraiya greatly increased his interest, or at least acceptance, of book learning, their time focused on generally more useful knowledge of jutsu, ninjas, or strategy than something that would be found on a test like this. Looking around the room he found that several others had realized this as well. The smarter of these were recognizing the purpose behind the strange rules. With a more thorough sweep, Naruto was surprised to find that unlike the previous Chunin exam, this time there were no plants to provide the answers. Narrowing his eyes, Naruto looked deeper, finally finding 3 shinobi writing diligently and pausing at exactly the same time. They weren't too difficult to spot as. Due to the difficulty of the questions, they were 3 of the few actually writing anything. Naruto couldn't help but smirk when he noticed how Shikamaru's shadow split 3 ways, each tracing Ir way under the desk in the direction of the progressing genin. Turning back to his test, he figured it was time to put his plan into motion. Being sure that he memorized each and every question, he raised his hand. Seeing Shikamaru quirk his eyebrow in his direction, he said, "I have to go to the bathroom," with a sheepish expression on his face. With a nod from Shikamaru to one of the other Chunin proctors, he was led out of the room. Entering the bathroom, Naruto immediately puffed into smoke as the clone released itself. Another Naruto appeared in the stall, having hanged itself as a plunger, which fortunately no one had needed to use. Re-entering the testing room, Naruto simply sat back and waited, occasionally filling in the answers as the army of clones he left in the library managed to locate and solve each question before dispelling themselves. Having successfully completed the 9 questions provided, Naruto began to look around, noticing some of the more inventive manners in which the assembled genin had decided to obtain the answers. For Sai, this task was relatively easy. Sitting only 2 rows back from Naruto, he saw Naruto's completed test and, with a few brush strokes and a whispered, "Choju Giga." A snake made of ink emerged from his test, hidden by his concealing arm. The snake raced down his body and up Naruto's, racing quickly over his page and back to Sai. Having completed its task, the snake returned to Sai's paper and lost its form, leaving only the answers on Sai's test. All around the room, genin cheated off nearby genin. Some did better than others and, as time progressed, more and more teams were eliminated, having been caught cheating 3 times. Much like last time, Ino used her family's Shintention no Jutsu to silently to get the ANSWERS from an unsuspecting nin in front of her, this time masking her body's unconsciousness with a quiet Kokahi no Jutsu. Some of the genin used wires to move mirrors to view the answers. Others used genjutsu techniques to hide their wandering eyes. Others still used familiars or kekai genkais to view the tests around them. "An hour has passed," said Shikamaru suddenly, interrupting the silence. "Congratulations to all of you who have made it this far. I will now give you the 10th question, so pay close attention." Standing up, he wrote on the board. "The rules are simple," he continued. "In order to pass the first part of the exam, your only task is to solve this cipher. In order to solve it, you must understand the origins of the previous 9 questions, as well as their answers. The information you need to solve these ciphers can be found within this exam, so cheating will not be tolerated from here on out. Attempting to do so will result in immediate expulsion from the exam. Play fair. Once you have answered the question, please bring your test up here and then feel free to leave. You have 1 hour." Ino smiled. Trust Shikamaru to turn a test about information gathering into a test of decoding and logic. The moment Shikamaru had said, "In order to solve this cipher," she, along with many others, immediately began to write down everything he had said. It was a good thing too, for the words contained many different clues and meanings. Being in Anbu had drilled it into her head the usefulness of ciphers and the ability to decode them and learn secrets they may contain. Looking back on the speech that Shikamaru had given, her eyes kept coming back to play fair. It had seemed so unnecessary to say that it kept jumping out at her. Suddenly, it came to her and her eyes widened as she thought. It's a Playfair cipher. Rewriting the random letters of the code into pairs, Ino now had. At beyond CZQNPC RA YMTQOIQYKM OM NHFEPMCU lay now AQBAEV company who CUHNQRKHQY. Okay. But a Playfair cipher is absolutely impossible to solve without the keyword, she thought to himself. Looking again at what Shikamaru had said, she read, you must understand the origins of the previous 9 questions. As well as their answers. Well, she had no idea where whoever wrote the test may have gotten the questions from, she certainly didn't recognize any of them. But, NFI that her answers were correct, she decided to start with that and wrote them down together. 1 3 2 5 3 2 4 26 5 2 6 7 7 22 8 2 9 1. Unable to glean anything from the numbers, she checked back with Shikamaru's words. Sure enough, there it was, hidden amongst the seemingly innocent. All the information you need to solve these ciphers can be found within this exam. These ciphers, she thought. Again, had he said, it, or, this, or even, this type of cipher, it would not have seemed strange. However, by saying these ciphers, he had actually implied that there was more than one cipher to decode. Looking back at her answers, it hit her, it was a substitution cipher. The highest number in her answers was 26, meaning that the Roman alphabet could be represented with each number 1 to 26 corresponding to a letter. Of course, this could be as simple as A equals 1, B equals 2, Z equals 26 to incredibly complex. Deciding to try to the most basic, she plugged in A equals 1, B equals 2, Z equals 26, giving her CEBZBGVBA. Clearly, that didn't form a comprehensible code word. Looking at the time, she clearly didn't have nearly enough to try every possible substitution that Shikamaru could have come up with. Again referring to her notes, she found the only clue she had yet to make use of was, you must understand the origins of the previous 9 questions. Still unable to think of where the questions could have come from. They had never been taught them before, Ino began to sweat. Her eyes focused back on all the information you need to solve these ciphers can be found within this exam, and she stopped and smirked. Of course Shikamaru would hide double meanings in his instructions. The word, origins, had been throwing her as it immediately made her try to think outside the information provided in the exam. Of course, origin doesn't just mean where the questions originated, it could also refer to the beginning of something. Writing down the first letter number of each question, Ino was left with ROT13NSUB. Her eyes widened. It looks like she was on the right track. ROT13N sub was a commonly used abbreviation for a simple cipher taught to even academy students, which stood for rotate 13 number substitution. In other words, N equals 1, O equals 2, A equals 14, M equals 26. Applying the ROT13N sub to her answers gave her promotion. Yes, she silently cheered, confident that she had now found the keyword required for breaking the Playfair cipher. She went about solving the ridiculously complicated 10th question, drawing out the required 5x5 grid starting with the keyword repeated letters removed. First she had T, I, C, H, U, Z. From here it was a simple matter of applying the 4 decryption rules for each pair letters in the original cipher, and she was left with. Reading from left to right, she added spaces A. ND removed the erroneous letter, X's, and grinned as she read what was left. Congratulations, you pass. Proceed to the roof and watch the clouds. Naruto frowned as he watched Ino exit. He couldn't believe it, but despite being overqualified for the rank of Chunin, it seemed as though he was actually going to fail this test. During his time with Jiraiya, Naruto had worked on both coding and decoding various ciphers. But even that seemed to not be enough to crack this code. Recognizing Shikamaru's obvious hint about it being a Playfair cipher, Naruto had once again used his bathroom trick, claiming, "What can I say, it's a stressful exam." When questioned by Shikamaru, regardless, every bit of information came back the same: he needed the keyword and just couldn't figure out where to find it. No s. Uner had he started to panic did a kunai land in the middle of his test. "You two, get out of here," came Shikamaru's stern voice. This was not the first time such an occurrence had happened since the issuing of the 10th question. But Naruto had just assumed they had been caught attempting to cheat. Glancing up at the other who had been kicked out, he found the confused face of Sai. But, began Naruto. No buts, my word is final. Shikamaru cut him off. With a nod to one of the other Chunin proctors, Naruto found the two of them being escorted from the room. As the door closed behind them, the Chunin turned to them and said, "Congratulations, your team has passed." Noticing the two gaping like a fish, he decided to explain. As was explained at the beginning of the test, teams either pass or fail together. Judging by your surprised expressions, I'm assuming the third member of your team has correctly decoded the cipher. Report to the roof to meet her, the second exam will begin from there, he said, indicating the stairs. And, with that, he re-entered the testing room. Glancing at each other, Sai simply shrugged and the two began to walk towards the stairs. Scene change. Arriving on the roof, Naruto and Sai found well over a dozen teams sitting around in idle chatter. Spotting Ino on the far side of the roof, they made their way over to her. Noticing their approach, Ino flashed the two a victory sign before launching into a discussion with them on the paper test and how the final problem was solved. After about another 20 minutes, the paper test ended and, much like last time Naruto had taken the exams, Mitarashi Anko appeared on the roof in a flashy manner, banner, kunai, and explosions included. Naruto laughed at other genin as many of them dropped into battle positions at the apparent sign of assault. But, the very obvious banner which read, "Second Chunin Exam Test Proctor, Anko Mitarashi, is here," caused most of them to relax, albeit slightly. Of course, Naruto's carefree attitude immediately grated on Anko and, with a sense of déjà vu, she chucked a kunai at him, aiming to nick his cheek. Naruto was, of course, expecting this, having dealt with Anko before and dodged only for Anko to once again appear behind him, this time catching the kunai and holding it to his throat. "I thought we were through with this a few years ago," she purred into his ear. "What exactly is so funny? Might I ask?" "Just you, Anko-san. You never change. I'm amazed you can still pull off those clothes at your age," he replied, baiting her. She pressed the kunai slightly deeper into his throat for the implied, though playful, insult and growled as, with a wink, the Naruto she was threatening burst into smoke. "So, since you're the examiner, let me guess, training area 44? Asked a voice from behind her. Turning around, she found none other than the insufferable blonde casually sitting with his teammates. Deciding that she had already wasted enough time, an actual L.Y. finding that she liked the kid's cheekiness, Anko nodded and, addressing the other genin, said, "For those of you who haven't figured it out, I'm Mitarashi Anko, your proctor for the second exam. Follow me. We will be proceeding immediately to the location for the second exam." With that, she jumped off the roof to a neighboring one, the assembled genin close behind. Scene change. Sure enough, Anko led the group to the ominous and foreboding training area 44. "Welcome to training area 44, she said, indicating the fenced-in forest behind her. Better known, of course, as the Forest of Death. She grinned as she saw several of the genin gulping or shaking slightly. 22 teams. That lazy bastard didn't cut you down nearly as well as I had expected. Oh well, I'll just have to be sure to thin out these numbers. Now, the rules for this exam are simple. Each team will be provided 3 scrolls, each of which displaying the name of the person who is to be carrying it. Within each scroll you will find the name and picture of a target from another genin team. In order to pass, your complete team must reach the center tower within 5 days with at least 1 pair of scrolls, a team scroll and the contained target's scroll. However, the tower will only be open after 3 days, so each team must spend a minimum of 3 days in the forest regardless of when you obtain a target scroll. In this test, fighting with other teams will be permitted, as well as killing your opponents. There are many ways to fail this exam, should your team not reach the tower with the required scrolls within 5 days' time. Lose a team member in the forest due to combat or poor survival skills, or leave the forest at any time, you fail. Are there any questions? 5 days? Asked a frightened Miss Genin. We weren't told to prepare for an extended survival mission. Exactly, smirked Anko. This is designed to test not only your team's battle prowess and ability to track targets while evading pursuers, But your ability to deal with unforeseen circumstances. Anything else? Seeing no more hands raised, she continued, good. As there will be deaths in this exam, you all need sign these waiver forms. Indicating towards the forms various chunin were carrying. Once your team has all signed their form, proceed towards the tent where you will receive your team scrolls as well as the gate from which you will begin. Enko couldn't help but grin at the frightened or apprehensive looks many of the genin were displaying. Seeing Konohamaru's apprehensive look, Naruto moved over next to his longtime friend. Hey, he called, causing Konohamaru to turn his attention towards him. What's with that look? Hey bro, he replied quietly, lacking all of his normal enthusiasm. Honestly, I'm just not sure I'm ready for this. I have confidence in my abilities and those of my teammates and we're certainly strong for rookie genin, but I'm just not sure I'll be able to survive a fight with an experienced shinobi. Relax, Naruto instructed. Most genin here aren't going to be out for blood. Besides, this is just one necessary step on the road to Hokage. Not to mention, I'm here, and I'll be sure to keep an eye on you guys. He said, patting the boy on his shoulder and giving him a reassuring smile. Thanks Ni-san, Konohamaru replied and smiled as he signed his form. Walking back towards his team, Naruto watched the Cloud Genin out of the corner of his eye. Oh yes, he thought, they're certainly focused on Konohamaru's team. Looks like Hinata may have been right. Eventually, L of the assembled genin had signed their forms and proceeded to their assigned gates. And, with a horn sounding, the second test of the Chunin exams began. Scene change. So, what's the game plan? Asked Ino as the trio walked casually into the forest. Well, we have two objectives for this test. Obviously, we need to gain a target scroll so we can pass this section, but we also need to find Hiruki Konoha team as soon as possible. Why do we need to find them? Do you have one of them as a target? Asked Ino, opening her scroll to see her target. No. Well, at least I don't know. Regardless, that's not why we need to find them. Hinata approached me yesterday. She seemed concerned that the Fist Cloud teams to participate in Konoha's Chunin exams since the Hyuga incident coincides with her sister's participation. Seeing his teammates' nods of understanding, Naruto continued, and, after observing the Cloud teams, I think she's probably right. They've been eyeing that team even before getting their target scrolls. This test would be the best opportunity for them to pull something without repercussions. Are we really going to waste our time trying to find your boyfriend and the Hyuga bitch? They're big kids. They can handle themselves. Sai, said Naruto, turning his full attention to the boy. When he saw Sai's questioning, he promptly decked him hard across the face, sending him flying until he crashed to the ground. Yamato's not here anymore. There's no one here with authority over our team. Do you really think I'm going to put up with your shit? If you make so much as one more comment that pisses me off, you'll be finishing the remainder of this test unconscious. Naruto turned his attention back to Ino. Do you really think you can follow through with that threat? He heard Sai ask as he picked himself back up. Naruto just continued to ignore him, but Sai felt a tap on his shoulder. Whirling around, Sai was once again introduced to Naruto's fist. Last warning, he heard Naruto say as the clone vanished. Looking back at Ino, Naruto found her grinning. I've been wanting to see that for a long time now. Anyways, I guess we should start by finding the rookie team. If your predictions are correct, then we'll be able to kill two birds with one stone. My target's one of the Cloud Genin anyways, she said, showing him her scroll. But how are we going to go about finding them? It's a big forest, and I neither the rookie Leaf Genin nor either Cloud team are within the range of my Kake Genkai. Don't worry, I placed a couple hanged clone on Konohamaru before the exam began. Seeing Ino's raised eyebrow, he explained, yeah, I got the idea from seeing Shino fight in our last exam. Anyways, one of the clones dispelled itself just before the exam began. So we at least know where they're starting over at Gate 12 it seems. I figure we'll head in that direction until your mantra is able to pick them up. On the off chance they manage to give us the slip, I've got another clone that'll dispel itself if they run into trouble. That is actually a well thought out plan, stated a surprised Ino. Very well, onwards to Gate 12, I'll keep watch AR. Ound us with mantra to ensure that we don't meet any other teams in the meantime. Perfect. Naruto agreed, and with that the two set out towards their destination, Sai following close behind. Scene change. Things were not going well, thought Konohamaru. When Hanabi spotted the Cloud team with her Byakugan, Konohamaru had been excited. They were only 30 minutes into the exam and they had already found a team with one of their target scrolls. Of course, the other team was far from helpless and their coordinated ambush wasn't nearly as effective as they had hoped. This was not a team of wet behind the ear genin. No. The Cloud team had clearly had plenty of experience, and the battle quickly became relatively even with each of the Leaf genin battling one opponent for dominance. Of course, when the other Cloud team suddenly appeared, the situation quickly went from manageable to fight for your life. There wasn't even time to escape, as, even if one of them could pull it off, that would simply leave the others out to dry. None of them had been able to land more than a glancing blow against their opponents. Hanabi was performing admirably, fighting against 3 opponents with relatively minor injuries. Of course she was clearly worn out and low on chakra, as the Cloud genin were primarily fighting her from a range so as to avoid her Jiyuken, forcing her to use Kaden repeatedly. He himself was battling 2 of the Cloud genin from the first team, but he was quickly losing ground, being at the disadvantage as well as having sustained a nasty burn to his side from a Raiden jutsu he was unable to avoid. Chancing a glance towards his third team member, Isakawa Amato, Konohamaru found him even worse off, beaten and bruised, his right arm dangling uselessly from his side, and a black burn encompassing the same shoulder. It was quite clear that his fight had been decided. The boy was barely conscious. Seeing the genin's distraction, the Cloud genin pressed their assault. Twirling his bow staff around expertly, Konohamaru proceeded to deflect another hail of kunai and shuriken. He was once again thankful for the wooden instrument, as each of the projectiles were charred with electricity that would have been conducted by metal weapons such as swords or kunai. Jumping back to give himself some space, Konohamaru called out, "Wait. Which of our scrolls do you need? You've clearly won this fight. There's no need for us to continue." The 2 genin he was fighting looked at each other, then back at him, and broke out laughing. "Clearly you haven't realized the situation you're in. We're not in the least bit interested in your scroll. Your team isn't even one of our targets," replied the taller of the 2. With that, the brief reprieve ended and, without warning, the other had flashed through hand seals and called out, "Raiden, Raihari no Jutsu." Using a quick kawarimi, Konohamaru evaded the lightning needles, but then was forced to kawarimi again almost immediately as the other Cloud nin sent a, "Raiden, Raiden," in his direction almost immediately after he regained his bearings. Looking around for his opponents, Konohamaru found one of them practically on top of him, kunai raised. Dodging the strike, Konohamaru attempted to strike him with his staff. Overextending himself slightly to land the blow, he was completely unprepared when the ground beneath him exploded upwards to reveal his other opponent leg already glowing with electric chakra. "Raiden, Resume," was the last thing he heard before his world exploded into pain. Pain like nothing he had ever felt raced through Konohamaru as the kit connected. Opening his mouth, he released an anguished cry as thousands of volts surged through him, frying him inside and out. The moment felt like an eternity, but thankfully for him, his body shut down and he was blissfully unconscious before his body even hit the ground. Moving swiftly through the forest, the Junin rapidly closed in on her destination. The Raikage truly had come up with a brilliant plan. After all this time, Kumo would finally obtain one of the world's most powerful Kake Genkai. Having expected both the paper test as well as a relatively unsupervised survival test, each of the 6 Cloud genin were outfitted with tiny, relatively undetectable communication devices from which they could communicate with each other, as well as with Yugito, the only Junin sent with the 2 teams. It was thanks to this planning that they were able to easily pass the first exam, able to communicate while appearing to merely be think to themselves, and coordinate the attack on the Hyuga's team. Not 10 minutes ago, her teams had completely overwhelmed the Leaf genin. The Hyuga girl's Byakugan was all but in their grasp and she was the only one left standing. Albeit barely thanks to chakra exhaustion. Then that boy and his team apparently showed up and in under a minute had defeated both of her teams in a surprise attack. Even with the element of surprise in their favor, she was surprised that her teams had lost. They were the best genin that Kumogakure had to offer, most of them more than qualified for Chunin rank. For them to lose so easily against another genin team was certainly worrisome. Still, the Raikage had planned ahead for such an eventuality, that's what she was here for if anything went wrong. He was certainly the most qualified to ensure the success of this mission. After all, who can fight off a Jinchuriki? Scene change. Slowly, very slowly, Konohamaru opened his eyes. His whole body ached. D is a lingering after-effect of the lighting jutsu he had been hit with. He was certainly shocked by what he found upon glancing around. The last thing he expected to find was a pile of unconscious CL. Ood shinobi tied up with a still relatively unharmed Hyuga Hanabi sitting next to them, fast asleep. "Oi, Konohamaru, you awake over there?" asked a voice from his left. Turning, ever so slightly so that he could see the source of the voice, Konohamaru inquired, "Naruto Nisan." "Yeah, sorry we were a little late," replied Naruto with a somber look. "Relax Naruto, he'll be fine. I'm pretty sure there won't be any lasting damage," came Ino's voice from his other side. Shifting ever so slightly, Konohamaru found her tending to an unconscious Amato, treating his arm with salves and bandaging it. "Why does my body hurt so much?" asked Konohamaru. "It's just a side effect of lightning jutsu. In this case, the voltage caused every muscle in your body to contract simultaneously. The severity of T muscle contractions themselves would be enough to cause you to be sore for a few days, but add to that the fact that several muscles, such as your biceps and triceps have conflicting motions, and you ended up with some muscle tears. I patched you up as best I could with my limited medical jutsu I learned from Sakura. As far as I can tell, all the actual damage is gone, you should be fine within a day or two," replied Ino. Nodding at the explanation, Konohamaru continued, "How long was I out?" "Only about 10 minutes. We got here just as that kick hit you," answered Naruto. "We need to get out of here as soon as possible," came Sai's voice from behind the group of Cloud Genin. Seeing the questioning looks of the remainder of the group, he elaborated, "I found communication devices on each of them. They're broadcasting to an external source, so it's entirely possible that this situation was planned and there may be additional shinobi coming." Despite the situation, Naruto smiled. Ever since his little warning earlier, Sai had been relatively tame, even bearable. "Good work Sai, well then, let's get a move on, we'll head back the way we came. Ino, make sure we aren't going to run into any other teams." With a puff of smoke, several clones appeared, 3 picked up one of the exhausted rookies and the remaining 1 leafed through the Cloud Nin's possessions, finding and taking scrolls for both his and Konohamaru's targets. With their task complete, the Leaf Genin vanished from the area. Scene change. She heard, rather than saw or sensed, the approach of what she assumed would be a minor inconvenience. Moving as silently as she was able to and with her shinobi-trained senses, the slight ringing of the bell was clear as day. Halting, she said, "Go ahead and come out, I know you're there." Despite her rush, it was a trifle exercise to knock off a genin team wouldn't set her back more than a moment or two, and her presence in the forest needed to remain unknown to anyone. With her keen senses, she noticed the incoming rush of a projectile and, dropping low, avoided it. A large, red, triple scythe passed over her head. As it passed, she found that it was connected to a large chain and, with a flick of her assailant's wrist, the scythe changed direction and once again headed for her, this time in a slash towards the ground. Rolling out of the way once again, Yugito came out of the roll in a defensive stance, standing to face the attacker. Still not quick enough. You've got some good reflexes, even if my attacks are the slowest in Akatsuki," came a voice in front of her as 2 shadows made their way into her view. Black cloaks with red clouds, bamboo casa adorned with bells, ringed fingers, painted nails, and slashed forehead protectors, they certainly fit the bill of Akatsuki. Shit, thought Yugito. This was definitely not what she needed right now. "Hidan, be careful, this is the Nibi's Jinchuriki. Let your guard down and you're dead." Quote, "Why do you tell me that every time we fight someone? You know as well as I do that that's not an issue for me. Excuse me for one moment while I offer a prayer to Jashin." Sigh, there you go again. Must you do those stupid prayers all the time? "Shut up Kakuzu," yelled the first, before continuing his prayers. Finished muttering to himself, he continued, I may not like it either, but the dogma of faith is strict about this stuff. Besides, I need to pray more than ever as this mission goes directly against my teachings. After all, carnage is a central part of the faith of Jashin, intentional. Keeping someone alive just doesn't sit well with me. I really don't have time for this, interrupted Yugito. I have more important ways to be spending my time. But, now that I know that you're Akatsuki, looks like I have no choice. I swear by the name Ni Yugito, I will kill you. Kill us. Battle cries like that always irritate me. And irritation makes me want to just slaughter everything. You're making it really difficult for me to follow our mission and intentionally leave you alive. Shut up Hidan, our orders are everything. Kakuzu interrupted his rant. There is an easy solution to all of this. Hidan said, thoughtfully. Turning his full attention to Yugito, he continued, why don't you just let us capture you? Don't fuck with me, screamed Yugito, having had enough of the strange pair. Launching herself off the tree she was on, she rapidly approached the pair. Smirking at her approach, Hidan flicked his wrist, returning his scythe to his hand and jumping to meet the oncoming attacker. Swung it forward, attempting to cleave her head from her shoulders. Pulling out a kunai, Yugito blocked the strike and, using her superior speed and flexibility, twisted to bury the kunai to the handle into the left side of Hidan's chest. The initial threat taken care of, Yugito jumped over Hidan, placing her foot on his shoulder and pushing off towards the other Akatsuki member, hands already flashing through seals. Raiden, she called, lightning chakra rushing through her hands. Suddenly, sensing an approach from her right, she was forced to interrupt her jutsu and duck low to dodge, surprisingly. The same scythe from before. Impossible. I'm sure I pierced his heart. She thought, finding the source to be none other than Hidan, kunai still protruding from his chest. That moment of surprise cost her as a porcelain mask extended itself from Kakuzu's back to point over his shoulder. With a few hand seals and a cry of, Fuden, Atsugai, from Kakuzu, the mask issued a powerful all-wind blast which slammed into Yugito with the force of a truck, sending her crashing across the ground. Immediately pressing the advantage, Hidan rushed the kunoichi's prone form side, once again raised in preparation. With a gleeful smile on his face, he brought the scythe down towards Yugito, who was just beginning to stir. His smile disappeared, however, as his progress was suddenly halted as the air pressure began to rise and a blue chakra laced in shadow encompassed Yugito's form. With an explosion of chakra, Hidan was blown backwards and looked up to find where once stood a simple kunai Kai, now an easily 30-foot demon cat, stood above them. Demonic chakra surged, blanketing the forest with killing intent. Scene change. As Yugito's demonic killing intent washed over the forest, the majority of the genin within found themselves frozen with fear. This was not a fear that they could just shake off, but one that immediately began to seep into their very souls. Within the village, loggers close to the forest began to cry in anguish as the power washed over them, reminding them of the events of 15 years past. Even back in the Hokage Tower, the monstrous amount of chakra being emitted could be felt. What the hell is that? Asked a shocked Tsunade, halting from her paperwork and glancing towards the source of the disturbance. From where she stood she could just make out the tips of the demon's twin tails peeking out over the treetops. Immediately, a full contingent of Anbu appeared in her office. Pointing to one team she said, find Jiraiya and tell him to come support us. The rest of you, with me. It appears that there is a Jinchuriki loose in the Forest of Death. With that said, she jumped out the window to the neighboring rooftop, Anbu team in hot pursuit running a T-top speed towards the demonic presence. Scene change. Seeing the retreating forms of the Hokage and Anbu, a man made his way out of the shadows of a nearby building. Jumping onto the side of the Hokage Tower, he effortlessly scaled the building, silently entering the window into the Hokage's office. Finding it deserted, as expected, the shinobi proceeded through the secret side door which brought him into the Hokage's private residence. Entering the private library, the man began to sift through the multitude of scrolls. Finally finding the one it was looking for, the man grinned in triumph. Adjusting his glasses, Yakushi Kabuto grabbed the scroll, carefully replacing those which had been moved, and began to make his exit. He smirked. Orochimaru's plans were coming together perfectly. Flashback. Kabuto, I have an assignment for you. Orochimaru said, sweeping into the lab. What is it, Orochimaru-sama? Kabuto replied instinctively. I have just received some very interesting information from our good friend Danzo. Orochimaru elaborated. He didn't need to explain that good friends was about the furthest thing from what he and Danzo were. He had every intention of stabbing He old war Hawk in the back at the earliest possible convenience. Not to mention he had no doubt that Danzo felt very much the same way. But, for now, the man certainly had his uses, not the least of which being that his information network was second to none. Not even Jiraiya could claim to have his hands in half as many jars as Danzo. Whether he intended to or not, he has provided us with several golden opportunities. First off, I need you to ensure that these 2 folders get delivered to the Raikage and Tsuchikage, respectively. Each of them will find the contents priceless, and we will toin ourselves the beginning of respectful relationships with them. This could of course come in handy for the future. More importantly, Kumo will doubtlessly send the Nibi's container to Konoha along with some genin to further their quest for the Byakugan. From what Danzo tells me, Akatsuki is on the move, which means they will likely target her while she is in Konoha should they get the opportunity. Use the distraction to obtain the scroll of sealing. It apparently, amongst other things, contains information on this wretched seal. End flashback. Exiting the tower, Kabuto couldn't help but feel exhilarated as he made to exit the city. It won't be long now, soon Orochimaru-sama will be back at full strength. Scene change. What is with this Jinchuriki? Asked Hidan, pulling the kunai from his chest. It's turned completely into its biju. We need to make this fast, Hidan. With that amount of demonic chakra, the Konoha nins will surely have noticed. In an instant, the demon was directly in front of Kakuzu. Clawed paw already descending to strike. Flashing through hand seals, Kakuzu activated his Doden, Domu. As his already tanned skin darkened and turned black, like asphalt, he reached up with both hands attempting to stop the beast's thrust. For half a second it seemed as though it worked, as the paw's momentum ceased momentarily, but the sheer force of the blow caused the ground beneath his feet to crumble and the Akatsuki member was crushed underfoot into the ground. This all happened so fast that it was over before Hidan could even move to assist or attack. Dodging the stones kicked up by the explosion of force, he began to charge towards the towering form, only to find himself looking into the beast's jaws. Oh, he thought, as a swirling vortex of flames Florida shed to life within the demon's open mouth. Feeling the heat of the flames wash over him, Hidan jumped out of the way as best he could, receiving only minor burns. So, this is the 2-tailed demon cat, thought Hidan, hiding behind a tree. Unfortunately for him, with the increased senses provided by the Nibi's chakra, Yugito was able to sense his position. Without any warning, shadows burst through the surrounding foliage, piercing his body from every angle. Turning her attention away from the skewered man, Yugito stepped back, checking the condition of Kakuzu. The moment her foot left the ground, a gigantic fireball filled her vision. Immediately conjuring up another flame like the one used against Hidan, she attempted to counter the incoming attack. Shockingly, her attack proved insufficient to counter Kakuzu's flames, and the gigantic cat was blown backwards, singed. Staring down at the Akatsuki member, she found not the man's body, but a being made of what appeared to be black wires with 2 masks sitting side by side. Sweeping both of her tails at the creature, managed to strike it with the second as it dodged the first, sending it crashing away. Turning in search of the missing Akatsuki member, Yugito felt cold steel enter her leg. Looking down, she found the apparently impossible to kill Hidan with his scythe buried in her left hind leg. His initial smirk to triumph disappeared as he removed the weapon to find that he had merely pierced the chakra projection of the demon cat which was encompassing her body, so no true injury remained. No torn muscle, no blood, nothing to even slow down the enraged Jinchuriki. Raiden, Gion, came Kakuzu's voice from nearby. Surprisingly, a massive bolt of lightning erupted from the air above the transformed Jinchuriki rather than from where the jutsu had been called from. Ill-prepared, Yugito's massive form was encompassed in lightning, driving the cat into the ground and momentarily stunning it. Using this paralysis to his advantage, Kakuzu jumped from his position onto the back the downed cat, black strings extending from sewed joints which appeared to be poorly holding his body together. Worming their way through the sea Hakra projection as though through water, Kakuzu's threads began to search out Yugito's body's position. Standing up and stretching after being caught up in Kakuzu's blast as well, Hidan felt himself get struck from behind. Using his hand to flip back to his feet, he turned to face his attacker only to find the dead eyes of what appeared to be a human many years ago. What little skin remained on his body was slowly peeling off even as the creature stared at the surprised Akatsuki member. Yugito, it seemed, while unable to physically move herself, had utilized the ability that the Nibi no Neko Mata was so famous for manipulating the dead. Sending her shadow into the earth beneath her currently prone form, she latched onto the decomposing beings from Chunin exams past and bent them to her will, creating her own personal miniature army. Back with Kakuzu, he had finally found the physical body of Yugito contained within chakra construct that they had been fighting. But, no sooner had his threads begun to wrap around her was he struck from behind by something very powerful and heavy, sending him careening off of the cat's back. His threads pulling against the body actually snapped, but not before digging into Yugito's skin. Once again activating his Doden, Domu. Kakuzu and his attacker crashed into the ground. Emerging from the hole, Kakuzu found himself standing almost directly next to Hidan and surrounded by a myriad of zombies, some human like the one in front of Hidan and some animal like the tiger which had jumped on him. Without warning, the dead creatures attacked, moving surprisingly fast. Only a moment after engaging in a furious taijutsu match with them, Kakuzu skidded backwards holding the jaws of the same tiger as Hidan attempted to slaughter the already dead ninjas. "Enough!" shouted Kakuzu, using a kuwarimi with one of his masked creatures. "Kaiten! Zukoku!" he shouted as the fire elemental released a blast from its mouth which quickly expanded in all directions, obliterating the army of undead. Jumping back next to his partner, he wiped the blood that stained the ends of some of his threads onto Hidan's side. "Hidan, end it, but don't kill her," he called as he saw the cat getting back to its feet. Ignoring the charging demon, using the blood still dripping from the wounds he had received, Hidan quickly formed a circle containing a triangle, the symbol for the Jashin religion, around himself. Licking the blood from the scythe, his skin began to turn black with the exception of where his bones were, which showed as white, giving him a skeletal appearance. Removing a metal stake from within his cloak, he quickly drove it into his own chest. Not an immediately killing blow, but one that would cause the victim to quickly lose blood, strength, and eventually their life if left untreated. With a roar of pain, the demon cat crashed to the ground, the chakra immediately dissipating, leaving only Yugao bleeding profusely from the hole in her chest, which matched the one Hidan was sporting, who immediately collapsed to the ground in a heap. The entire battle had taken less than 10 minutes. Picking up the rapidly draining body, Kakuzu said, "Let's go. You complete your ritual once we're clear of the area. I need to ensure that this girl isn't going to die on us." With that, the two disappeared from the scene. By the time the Konoha shinobi arrived, the battle was over and the area was a wasteland. Small fires still burned around the clearing which showed obvious signs of battle, but there was no sign of the demon, Jinchuriki or otherwise. It had been 24 hours since the demonic presence had suddenly and mysteriously disappeared, and Naruto was still shaken from the experience. Granted, the reason he was shaken wasn't the demonic presence itself, while quite powerful. It was nothing compared to the power that Kyuubi possessed. No, the demon couldn't have been much stronger than Gaara was in his Shukaku form. What scared Naruto was quickly the demonic chakra had disappeared. Being a Jinchuriki himself, he knew that channeling that level of the demon's chakra took some time. Release one couldn't simply turn it on and off like a light. That left only one option left, that it was snuffed out, and that was what had Naruto disturbed. The most likely explanation was Akatsuki, as it was already known that they were after the Jinch Uriki despite their extended disappearance. Their presence in the forest would also explain why the other Jinchuriki felt it was necessary to fight at that level in a test full of genin. Pushing these thoughts to the side momentarily, he turned back to the more pressing matter, the exam they were currently in. Having obtained all the scrolls necessary to pass the second part of the exam, his T.M. had taken to avoiding, or at least send a group of clones to lead away, distract the remaining genin using Ino's Kekai Genkei, as there was no actual reason to fight them. The group of rookie genin were on the mend, Ino's knowledge of basic medical ninjutsu proving to be a godsend. With the exception of Amato, whose injured arm required actual medical attention and remained in a sling, they'd all be at full strength before they headed for the tower the next day. Scene change. Throughout the forest, skirmishes were occurring as the various genin fought each other to obtain the required scrolls to proceed to the next exam. Each team had their own strategy for how to survive their time in the forest. Some teams simply sought out every team they could find, counting on their abilities and superiority over the competition to allow them to eventually find a team with the required scroll. Other teams decided to lie in wait, avoiding other teams for days as they proceeded towards the tower. Or sought the position of the teams of their targets, saving their strength until the exam was nearly over to assault their targets once they were weak from the survival training and other fights. Their teams still stumbled across their targets early on and proceeded much like Naruto's team, avoiding the competition as best they can until the tower would open and allow them entry. Finally, some teams set up traps and/or prepared ambushes, hoping to use these to their advantage. One such team, a team from Kusagaku, was doing just that. Having silently tracked down the camp of the team containing 2 of their 3 targets. They lay in wait, preparing traps should things go sour and planning their ambush for when the opportunity best presented itself. Just as they were planning to move in, an unnatural mist began to fill the clearing from the opposite side. Kurigaku no jutsu, they each thought, recognizing the jutsu oftentimes used by mist shinobi. Deciding to lie in wait as the events played out. The grass shinobi watched as a team from Kiri made their way into the clearing, disappearing into the fog. Being too far away to hear any jutsu being called out, the grass nins listened to the sounds of battle coming from the clearing but muffled by the mist. Not 3 minutes into the assault, anguished screams could be heard from within the mist, followed by sudden, blood-freezing silence. As the mist began to clear, the observing genin started at the scene. There, in the middle of the clearing stood a single Iwa genin, red armor and sacket drenched in blood, emotionless golden eyes surveying the area. Surrounding him was nothing more than blood and an assortment of body parts, nearby discarded headbands identified as belonging to the ambushing mist ninjas. The earth of the clearing was kicked up and contained deep gouges in many places. One of the bodies was still smoldering slightly. Fear, like nothing they had ever felt before, gripped each of them. Looking at one another in silent conversation, the trio of Kusa-nins unanimously decided that it would be a better idea to go after their third target, and get as far from this monster as possible. Glancing one last time into the clearing, they found the ridiculously tall genin staring directly at them. All pretext of subtlety gone, the genin turned to flee only to find the Iwa nin's teammates standing behind them. A moment later, the forest rang with their screams. Scene change. Outside of the forest, things had been very busy. Taking the threat of the demon very seriously, Tsunade had ordered Jiraiya and one of her elite Anbu teams to stand 24-hour guard around Training Area 44, watching for any more signs of it, with orders to stop the Jinchuriki at all costs. Before leaving, she and Jiraiya shared a lingering look. The signs of battle were clear. This was no genin-level battle. The fact that no bodies, nor the remains of them, remained made it seem that the Jinchuriki had either lost the fight or, at the very least, not been entirely victorious. Therefore, unless Naruto had fought off this other demon, something neither believed to have occurred, then there were other threats in or near the city. Reviewing all of the paperwork on the entrance to this year's Chunin exam, Tsunade remained stumped. They all were accounted for, thanks to the tracking bugs placed by Aburame Shino and S. Hibi during the first exam. None of them were in the area when the battle occurred. That means that at least 2 people had managed to slip by the normal security for the exams, and that was troubling to say the least. Scene change. On the 3rd day of the exam, Naruto's group began to head leisurely to the tower. They would be unable to enter until midnight, so they were in no real rush. Walking to maintain their stamina. The genin simply enjoyed the surrounding scenery. The forest was ancient with towering trees and a multitude of species, many of which long thought to be extinct. It was, however, also this aspect of the forest that made it so dangerous. In general, the species of this particular stretch of forest were larger than their counterparts anywhere else in the world, making them even more dangerous. The forest was populated by carnivorous plants, venomous snakes, flesh-eating leeches, and giant tigers. It was the latter of these species which Naruto and company ran upon during their trek. A half-dozen tigers each taller than any of the genin emerged from the woods ahead of them. "I'll take care of this," said Sai, stepping forward, paintbrush in hand. "Make it fast, Sai, there's another team approaching. One of the Iowa teams. We won't be able to avoid them if this takes too long," added Ino. "At that pace we're moving, we're not going to be able to avoid them anyways. Teams like this one are blocking the routes to the tower, we'll have to go through them sooner or later," Naruto said with a strange expression on his face. Besides, he continued with a grin which didn't reach his eyes. "I could use the warm-up." With that and a nod from Ino, he began walking in the direction Ino indicated for him. "Will Naruto-san be okay?" asked Amato. He was very worried about the boy's ability to defeat an entire team single-handedly. "Don't worry about him, you weren't conscious when we arrived to begin with, so I understand your skepticism, but Naruto-kun is strong," smiled Ino towards the boy. She started, surprising herself with her use of the kun suffix. Shrugging it off the surprise, she continued indicating the tigers. "Besides, we've got more pressing matters at the moment." Naturally, the direction Naruto was moving in took him directly through the ranks of the tigers, impeding their progress. Not paying them any mind, Naruto simply began to walk past them. Each one turning to watch the human's movements when suddenly one turned and pounced at him. Not even looking at the attacking animal, Naruto shifted slightly to his left, dodging the blow. And continuing as a tiger made of ink bowled over the threat. The animals, noticing the assault on one their own, turned towards the source, teeth bared only to find their path blocked by several tigers of ink. In the confusion, Naruto disappeared into the forest. As it turned out, the ink beasts were no match for the larger, and stronger, tigers of the forest. Within minutes, each of them had been demolished. At best having caused superficial wounds, leaving only pools of ink littering the ground. It was thus a surprise when 3 of the tigers suddenly halted in their approach of the genin and collapsed unconscious. "What just happened?" asked a shocked Konohamaru. Seeing the collapsing tigers, Sai simply grinned, ignoring the other genin's question, his brush moving rapidly over the scroll he was holding. "Choju Giga," he called as another 6 ink beasts emerged and attacked the somewhat weary remaining tigers. However, just as before, these were slaughtered by the animals who remained completely unscathed. It was, however, simply a distraction which used the ink tigers to draw attention from the other threat. A trio of snakes made of ink which slithered their way across the ground and up the limbs of the animals, burying their fangs into the tigers. Very quickly, these 2 collapsed the ground, leaving the group's way unimpeded. Scene change. Meanwhile, after passing the tigers, Naruto quickly picked up his pace to move the battle away from his teammates and the other Konoha genin. Arriving in a clearing suitable for battle, Naruto stopped and waited for the Iowa team to arrive. He didn't have to wait long as the team emerged from the foliage ahead of him. "About time you got here," Naruto said, casually drawing their attention to him. "You!" screamed one of the Iowa nins. His expression going from smug to one of hatred instantaneously. Noticing this, as well as the mirrored expressions on the remaining 2 Iowa genin, Naruto sighed. "There it is again. Me, I've come across one of you Iowa nins in this exam, I get that look. And yet, I've never met an Iowa shinobi before, let alone done anything against your country. Care to explain?" "It's your blood," one of the other genin replied. "His cursed blood runs through your veins. Your very existence is an insult to us, Namikaze." "Oh, so you found out," Naruto responded casually. "Well, that's one less secret to keep, I suppose. It's certainly fortuitous for us to come across you here while you're all alone. Prepare to die," added the 3rd Iowa genin, who then, without warning, threw himself at Naruto, weapons drawn. Dropping into a loose fighting stance, Naruto waited for the nin to approach but was surprised when he halted his advance just before getting within his field of reach. The previo. USLY approaching Iowa nin jumped straight up as a volley of kunai and shuriken approached Naruto, concealed by the approach. A very good attack pattern, thought Naruto, noticing the nin that had charge. Him preparing to hurl weapons from this apex of his jump should Naruto dodge, but not good enough. Flashing through hand seals, he called out, "Fuden, Kamedachi." The winds picked up, causing the projectile weapons to be blown harmlessly away as the cutting technique surged on towards his airborne opponent. Naruto was impressed, however, as one of the genin jumped into the air to his teammate. Each twisting their bodies, they placed the soles of their feet together and bending their knees, pushed off dodging the whirlwind. Leaning his body to the side, Naruto dodged a taijutsu strike from his third opponent, noticing the rock which now covered the boy's hands. Striking out instinctively, as the boy sailed past him, Naruto blocked his incoming kick with one hand, placing his other hand on the boy's stomach, whispered, "Impact." The attacking Iwa genin's momentum changed suddenly, sending him perpendicular for the direction of his thrust kick combo, his eyes growing wide as the blow connected. He passed out, crashing unceremoniously to the ground. One down, thought Naruto, turning to the remaining two. "Nijima," called the Soul Iwa Kunoichi, running to her teammate's side as the other finished his hand seals, yelling, "Doden, Ritsudo Tenshou," slamming his palm into the ground. The ground around Naruto began to churn and, in a whirlpool-like manner, began to draw the items towards the center where the pressure and rotation would crush them. In order to dodge, Naruto simply jumped sideways, out of the revolving mud. Judging his trajectory, the same Iwa nin flashed through some more hand seals, calling out, "Doden, Doryu Taiga," as he tapped the ground with his foot. Seeing his landing point turn into a river of mud with no chance of traction, Naruto quickly surveyed the scene. To find the Iwa Kunoichi already moving in behind a wave of projectiles, rock encompassing her fist. "Let's see what they think of this," he thought as he neared the ground. "Geppo," he whispered, and, as though it were solid, Naruto pushed off the air, changing directions. Spinning his body, he did this 2 more times in an instant, placing himself behind the Iwa Kunoichi and, before she could move to defend, knocked her out with a well-placed chop to the back of the neck. "That's 2. Naruto smiled at the last rock genin, thoroughly enjoying himself. Somewhat winded from the exertion of 2 C-ranked Doden jutsus in quick succession, the only conscious Iwa nin could only gape in shock as their combo not only was completely ineffective, but resulted in another member of his team incapacitated. "The hell was that?" he asked, hoping to stall for a moment to regain his breath. Humoring the final opponent, Naruto simply said, "Unfortunately, a shinobi doesn't reveal his secrets, lest their enemies find a way to counter them. Shall we finish this?" Without waiting for an answer, he immediately rushed at the final opponent. Flashing through hand seals, the Iwa genin decided to try one last combination to defeat this overwhelming opponent, even if it would take nearly all of his remaining chakra. "Doden, Doro Geishi," he called out, slamming his palms on the ground. A large earthen wall flipped up in front of his hands, obscuring him from Naruto's view. The wall, however, did little to impede Naruto's progress as, without even pausing, a swirling ball of chakra appeared in his hand. "Rasengan," he called, allowing the jutsu to simply demolish the wall with little resistance. Though surprised, the rock genin didn't panic and attempted to engage Naruto in taijutsu. Though, not being his forte, he was unable to land a single blow. With little difficulty, Naruto slipped within his guard and a simple impact to the side sent him sprawling, seeming to end the fight. However, Naruto was not fooled. That was definitely not a human body, he thought. Sure enough, the sprawled genin simply cracked and disintegrated from the place of impact. "Tsuchi Bunshin," he thought, surprised, "then that means Doden Kekai, Duro Dumu," called out the final rock genin, rising out of the earth as he finished his hand seals. When he quickly struck the earth overturned, trapping Naruto inside a mouthless cave. "It's over," he thought, relieved while panting. In truth, he was barely standing at that point, but the best part about his final technique was, after using it, he would be able to refill his chakra reserves with those of his opponent. Placing his hands on the dome, he began to do just that. His relief, however, was short-lived as, no sooner had his hands ouched the earth did his opponent come crashing out the other side. "Impossible. He's a monster," was the only thought to run through his head as his strength left him and he fell to his knees. "You're pretty good. For a genin, that would have certainly worked on nearly everyone in this exam. Unfortunately, I'm no normal opponent. Not to mention, I've seen this technique before." The rock nin here, D as the seemingly unbeatable opponent stalked towards him. "Che, just kill me, I'm not going to beg," he yelled, not even having the strength to stand. "Why would I kill you? I'm not my father, and this isn't the war. You just happened to be between my team and the tower and looking for a fight. Better luck next time, the blonde replied, vanishing from sight. The exhausted genin felt a sharp pain at the base of his neck and everything went black. Scene change. Catching up to Naruto, the others found evidence of earth jutsus around the clearing and Naruto sitting casually on top of a rock staring up at the sky. About time you guys got here, I've been done for almost 5 minutes, he said, not even turning to look at their approach. We weren't in a hurry, figured we'd let you have your fun, replied Konohamaru. Where'd your opponents go anyways? Did they run off? Nah, I beat the 3 of them and decided that rather than leaving their unconscious forms in the forest here, I'd send my clones to take them outside where it'd be safe. Granted, they'll fail the exam, but at least this way they won't die, shrugged Naruto. With the final obstacle taken care of, the group of 6 made their way casually to the tower, arriving just after midnight of the 3rd day. Entering the tower, they found none other than one Yumino Iruka waiting for them. Iruka-sensei, Naruto called out jovially, genuinely happy to see his longtime mentor and friend. Hey Naruto. About time you came to see me, he joked. After this exam, you'll have to catch me up on all of your adventures over ramen, my treat. Turning his attention to all of the assembled genin as Naruto fist pumped in excitement, he continued. Congratulations to all of you on passing the 2nd stage of the Chunin exams. As you're well aware, this stage doesn't end for another 2 days, so until then, each team has a suite of rooms here in this tower to stay in and rest. There's also a cafeteria on the 2nd floor that's open 24 hours. So, go pick yourselves out rooms and get some rest, you'll certainly need your energy soon. Nodding to their collective teacher, the 6 genin did just that. 2 stages down, 1 to go. That's it for today, I will stop here. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you please consider subscribe and make sure to hit that like button, share with your friends and don't forget to check out my Patreon. Details in description.